And welcome everyone. Let's do a sound check. Just give me a minute. Okay, that appears to have worked out. So welcome everybody. I'm so glad to see you all here. Tonight is Friday, July 25th. Friday, July 25th. And we are here for a very interesting show tonight called TheProf, Satanic Ritual Abuse by Cops. The Curious Case of Courtney Tamagny. So we're going to be getting into that tonight. But before we do, of course, I want to say hello to all my lovely chatters who are here super early, getting the place warmed up. And I'm so glad to see that. So good to see everyone. I'm glad you are here for this Friday night show. And let me go in there and see who's here so I can welcome you all. Appreciate you being here early. So let's see. We are going to back it on up and see who was here super early. All right. Look like we have Amy. Hey, Amy, what up? Hey, Amy's hitting up the support pathways here, the Cash App, Buy Me a Coffee, and also the Substack. And I got a new post today on the Substack. So, sure. Thank you, Amy. And everyone, please do support the channel in all the ways you would like to. And go over and check out the Substack. That's my new community page, okay? Suffering community page harassment and strikes. So the Substack is the new community page. So please go over there to the Substack and subscribe, whether you're free or paid. It should be worth your time. So please go do so. And welcome and thank you again, Amy. Okay. Now, also, I want to say hello to Sweet Dude Shibby and Mino Dino, who are here early. Look what look what the cat drug in. All right, guys. Thanks for coming in early. Also, author Claremont. What's up, Claremont? Good to see you. Good to see Heather Brown Heavy. I'm gonna put her little sweet face up there. What's up, Heavy? What's up, Rhonda Holton? Okay. Trial Junkie says, hit the like, guys. All right. We got Lisa. We got Mark Ellis. Hey, what's up, Mark? Hey, Heather. Foot getting better, but will take a long time to heal up. All right. We got Mino Dino. Sweet Dude Shibby. Rhonda Holton. All right, good. I don't want to miss anyone. All right, who else came in super early? Let's see. Rhonda Holton. Samantha Springman. What's up, Samantha? Sorry, I was making up bottles of flavored water and getting them in the fridge. What's up? Heather says, whoever donated yesterday, thank you so much. Four Pids, what's up? Says, good evening, everyone. Good evening to you. Hey, we're going to hear from a case tonight that, in my opinion, has some very, very similar analogies or similarities to Delphi. So you guys, you know, strap up your pants there and get a refreshment and tie your shoes, whatever, and get ready for a jaunt through the wilderness here. Let's see. We're going to say hello to Nicole. What's up, Nicole Watt? Nicole's here. All right. Mark Ellis says, I'm going to buy a van so I can drive while I'm in my wheelchair. It will be made special for me to drive. Kimberly, what's up, Kimberly? Thule Society says, Kimberly, welcome in. It's good to see you, and please enjoy the chat. What's up, Critter Mama? What up? And Rebecca Ann. What's up, Rebecca? Rebecca Ann. I saw a nice community post or two over there on your page. Everyone subscribe to Rebecca Ann if you want some funny community posts. What's up, Snoop Sleuth? Lurking tonight because I'll be listening. Hello to friends, chat, and prof. Ninja Warrior Assassin says hello to everybody. What's up, Ninja? Okay, good to see everybody. We got who else coming in? All right. I'm just still looking through these names, make sure I don't skip anyone. Kate Hughes here. What's up, Kate? Happy Friday, Kate. Happy Friday, everyone. Yeah, Friday. TGIF. Thank God it's Friday. Can't speak. Sorry. TGIF. Let me put it in there. TGIF. Okay. Thank God it's Friday. All right. So we're getting there. Muty Silence coming in. What up, Muty? Okay, we got Samantha Springman. I want to give a special thanks to Muty Silence for helping me with some things for the show tonight. Thank you, Muty. By the way, everyone, please thank Muty for the assistance with the show tonight. Y'all riding with me again tonight while I'm working. All right, Quad. Okay. It's a wonderful night here. All right. We got everyone coming in. It's good to see everybody. I'm not going to put them all up there, but I'll say hello to Granny. What up, Granny? Hey, Ninja. What up with the super chat? Thank you, Ninja. All right. All right. Who else we got here? Thank you, Kimberlyn. All right. Kay, what's up, Kay? Hello. Good to see you. Rhonda Holton. You like the new graphic? Thank you. All right. Critter Mama. What's up, Critter Mama? Prof's here. I see Prof in the chat. All right, y'all. Holly Gibbons. What's up, Holly? Long time no see. Hey, y'all. I'm still awake to watch the show tonight. Life has been super busy but good. We're glad to hear. God bless. Okay, Melissa. What's up, Melissa? Hope. Hey, everyone. Hope you are all doing well. Welcome, Melissa. And Holly. All right. Snoop Sleuth. All right. Hit the like, y'all. Hit the like and put your chat filter to all. Okay. What's up, Sunflower? Good to see you. Dina, what's up? Good to see you. All right. We're coming through. We're coming through. Brenda's here. What's up, Brenda? Brenda Mace. Miss Pie Crust. Hey, Pie Crust. Thanks for coming in. Where's my pie? All right. We're getting into here. We got Goose's Gammy. What up? Oh my goodness, I'm not late this time. All right, what's up? Oh, Fur Baby Daddy. What's up, Fur Baby Daddy? Okay, boom. Good to see everybody. Prof's crew in the house. Okay, good to see everybody. All right. Just checking out some things. Apologize. Give me a moment. All right. Good to see you, Dr. Corbo. Good to see you. All right. Jake Brooks. Good to see you. Welcome in. Dark Arts by Adrian. What's up? Good to see you. Welcome on in. Apologize for the delay here. I'm just trying to get through all of this and make sure I don't skip over anyone. All right. Hey, Rhonda. All right. I think we are making it through here. Gretchen's here. What's up, Gretchen? Good to see you. What's up, Deb? Hey, there's Deb coming on in. Hebby, Dino, Adrian, Ninja, Rhonda, Muty, Lisa, Snoop, Hello, Shibby, Four Pits, Miss Pie Crust, Miss K, Gretchen, Nicole, and Amy. For baby daddy. All right. Prof, the ritual stuff has been going on in the general area of Delphi, Logansport, etc. since the 70s that I know of. Well, send me an email about it, sweet cheeks. Okay, send me an email. What's up, Kali Yuga? Good to see you. Okay, Kali Yuga. Ninja gave a super chat. You rock, Prof. Thank you, Ninja. Okay, good job. Good job. With Kate, you, Trial Junkie. All right. Icy Cat. Hey, what's up, Icy Cat? Icy Cat's in here. All right, Dieter's in here. Hey, Dieter. Welcome in, Dieter. All right, boom, boom, boom. We're getting through it. Okay. All right, Miss K. What's up, Miss K? Okay. Stephanie. Hey, Stephanie. I made it. Thank you for coming, Stephanie. All right, boom. We got through most of that. So let's see. Anyone else? Locar, there he is. Hello, Prof and chat. I done some reading on the topic tonight. Very disturbing if the accusations are proven. Puts a new spin on the Jersey Devil. All right. All right, y'all. So we made it through the greetings. So everyone else who's just lurking, come on into the chat. There's nice people in the chat. You enjoy the live chat. Please enjoy the live chat. And like I said, while you're at it, support the channel in all the ways you like to support it. Also, I don't know if Amy can go dig up my GoFundMe, but we'll talk about the GoFundMe at the end of the show, Miss Amy. So appreciate that. What's up, lurkers? Yes. Hello. Okay, so we're going to get started tonight. So tonight's show is very interesting. I came across this and then I did some digging into it. And I don't know if I have an opinion one way or the other that's too strong. But after we do the first portion, I'll be giving my commentary. So I'd rather just kind of dive in head first and get into it to get you all oriented into the conversation, and then afterwards I'll do some talking. So anyway, God bless everyone. Thanks for being here. I hope you enjoy your Friday, and please kick back, relax, enjoy the show. We're going to dive head in, and we're going to begin with taking a look at a portion of a podcast called We're All Insane. And I want to thank We're All Insane for the use of this segment here for commentary, criticisms, and conundrums. And anyway, I'm going to cite my fair use privileges here. And we're going to use a little portion of her podcast to orient us in onto what we're actually talking about. So with that being said, let's dive right in, okay? Sounds good? Sounds good.
I'm Courtney Tamagny. I'm a survivor of sexual assault as a child, satanic ritual abuse, and my father's molestation throughout my whole life. He is the chief of police, and I'm here today to share my story to help others and help end this epidemic of child abuse that's going on. I was born into a cult, and yeah, now I'm out, and here I am. So I was born into a cult, satanic ritual abuse. It's a satanic cult which happens in the town of Rivervale. It's a town issue, and that's where it's local.
And is that Jersey?
It's in New Jersey.
Okay.
It's in Bergen County, New Jersey. It's right outside the city, but it's also very safe, put together, middle, upper white class, and a lot of money compared. Let me go again. There's a lot more money, and that's why this is happening, because it's an organized crime. So I'm a victim and a survivor of this organized crime that went on and is still going on.
Mm-hmm.
So it started when I was 3. We lived in our old house, 3 or 4. It's blurry. My father, he's the chief of police in Leonia. He started by sexually assaulting us, and it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. So my first memories, we lived in our house in Tenafly. I was in the bedroom I shared with my sister at the time, and he came into our room while my mom was home. And my mom wasn't home, sorry. He came into the room while my mom was out of town for the night and just laid in bed and started touching me and doing a lot more. And my mother came back, she gave me a Smurf, and that's where I was like, oh, she's back, thank gosh, I'm okay. And unfortunately, it just kept getting worse from there.
How many siblings did you have?
I have 2 sisters.
Okay. And was it happening to all 3 of you guys?
Yes, it happened to all 3 of us. Pretty similar, but also different. Everybody has different personalities, different reactions, different fight or flight modes, but yeah, it happened all to us 3.
So for you, it began, you think, when you were 3 or 4? Or that's just when
3
you
or 4,
first
yeah.
went? Okay.
So I moved into Rivervale. That's when I lived in Tenafly. So I knew I was below 4.
Okay.
And we moved into our Rivervale house where the cult was happening and the satanic ritual abuse and all the members of the cult live when I was 4, 5.
Okay. And this might be jumping ahead, but with the cult, was it part of a church or just like it's a standalone cult?
More standalone.
Okay.
Definitely churches involved that help, that help go about it, but more doing their own thing and their own rituals.
Got it.
So the peak of my abuse was from around 4th grade to fifth. Let me go again. Around fourth grade to sixth grade. That's where the peak of it was all happening. Unfortunately, it did happen through the ages of 3 to 15, but that's where like all of my memories stand out and were the most rampant.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
What is the age gap between you and your sisters?
So my older one is 17 months older than me, and then my younger one they're my brother now. They transitioned, Jupiter, 2 years younger than me about.
Okay.
So we're all pretty close in age.
Okay.
So there's 3 of us, and then there's my mom. So the normal thing with domestic violence is usually it starts with the wife. The wife gets injured, beat. Luckily, my mom wasn't injured. She was never abused by my father, because the more unfortunate thing is my father only had a drive for kids, which, as sickening as it sounds, that's all he cared about.
Okay, important point here. Important point here. Um, so that you all know, although she says her mom was not involved or had no knowledge, her mom is backing her up and supporting her on this, okay? As of 2 days ago, 2 or 3 days ago, okay? So her mom is 100% behind her, just so you know. And also, keep in mind, she just said her younger sibling is now transgender, which I'm sure is also a result, or at least had some effect, this abuse, because she's saying that all 3 kids were abused, but not the mother. But the mother is supporting and 100% behind her. Okay, so we'll just keep moving, but please enjoy.
All he wanted, and he didn't care about us. He just cared about the usage of us. I truly do believe I was born just for the fact of abuse.
That's another really sad statement I just wanted to add in there. When I first watched this, that's the part that almost made me, it really grabbed my heart, okay, pulled on the heartstrings. She just said that she believes that she was born to be abused. Do you know what that means? Think about what that would mean. Let me back that up a second, because I couldn't believe she said that. Let's see. Okay. Let's see.
Born
Let's see. Here.
had a drive for kids, which, as sickening as it sounds, that's all he cared about. That's all he wanted. And he didn't care about us. He just cared about the usage of us. I truly do believe I was born just for the fact of abuse. And it took me years to really think about that. And I was like, he doesn't care about you. All he cares about is using you as an object for money and for trafficking and to have for the cult. So a lot of cults and a lot of abuse just stems down from bloodline. Bloodline abuse is it's a super important thing that people don't talk about enough, is when you're abused, you either become an abuser or you break free of the cycle. And breaking the cycle is super hard for a lot of people, because men usually it might be physically, verbally abusive, some type. They start with that if they were abused. Women, they don't tend to be abusive, but then they fall towards that abusive trap of a man because that's all they know. So if they're abused as a child, they're going to go to an abusive man, and the man may be abusive, and then the woman doesn't know how to speak out, stand up, and break the cycle. So really, it's just a never-ending cycle of abuse.
Do you think your mom knew what your dad was doing to you girls?
No, my mom had no idea.
Okay.
So
Yeah, my mom had no idea.
a big part of it was we had a lot of sedatives were part of the abuse. So we were being sedated. It was easier. My parents never had a good relationship. They were always going to get divorced since I was younger. I never wanted them to be together. I just wanted to be away from my dad. But yeah, so we had a lot of sedatives, which took into effect and made the abuse a lot easier, a lot quieter for my father to do. My father slept in upstairs with me and my younger brother, Jupiter, and
Yeah, I
my
agree.
older sister slept downstairs with
I agree, Dr. Corbo. I disagree with her assessment on how women react to satanic ritual abuse as well.
mom. So we had a decent sized house. You can't hear things. Along with my mom slept with earplugs in all the time. So yeah.
And then with the satanic ritual stuff, when did that begin around the same time as well?
That began when I was a little bit more older. It was kind of always lingering, but more fourth grade was when it really started,
Okay.
I would say.
And how was your life like at school and things like that?
Absolutely awful. So I was going from being taken to these rituals, watching sacrifices, just being up all night, and it was a calendar. I don't know if you know, satanic cults, they go by a calendar, their own calendar.
All right, listen up here, guys, because this portion here, you have to ask yourself, this girl is 20 years old. If she's making all this up, how did she have the foresight to go in and speak this specifically on this aspect? So listen closely to what she's saying here. I'm actually going to back it up a second. Let's see.
Absolutely awful. So I was going from being taken to these rituals, watching sacrifices, just being up all night, and it was a calendar. I don't know if you know, satanic cults, they go by a calendar, their own calendar. When the moon's aligned, different holidays like Halloween. They have a lot of different holidays, and based on that, they're like events and drum circle parties, whatever they want to call it. So I wasn't able to sleep. I was up at night, and when I wasn't at these events, I was just being abused by my dad and my neighbor, which is a key role. Is my neighborhood was involved with the cult. So my neighbor, Keith Slevin, was abusing me. So my dad and him worked as a tag team. So when they worked together, maybe we didn't have an event that night, but they wanted to have fun with us on their own terms, which they call fun. So I'm surviving. Surviving is all I did, was just trying to live through the night. And I didn't want to survive, quite frankly. I just wanted to die. But I was just surviving. And when I woke up for school in the morning, as a child, it's so hard when you're growing, you're learning, you're trying to be social. The drugs are impacting my body, my vaginal, I can't sit up. My vaginal pain is so bad, my tailbone pain, just from all the abuse going on. So school never hit it off for me. It just never worked out very well. I had to transfer out of school in 6th grade. I went to a private school in 7th and 8th grade. And then freshman year, I wasn't able to go to school, and I did homeschooling.
And who homeschooled you? Was it your mom?
No, I went to this program
Okay.
online, so yeah.
And during this time, did you ever feel like you wanted to tell somebody what was going on, or were you too scared?
I absolutely did want to tell somebody. I always wanted to spoke. They would call me a scutch. I just was trying to fight and fight. But I just knew there was no chance of me being able to say anything, because with my dad being the chief of police,
Right.
he held a gun on him at all times, and legally so. So I would be threatened with the gun to me, the gun to other people. If you speak up and tell anybody, you're going to be killed, or your family's going to be killed. And what was worse than me being killed, because then I would be out of the situation, was he's going to kill my mom. Nobody's ever going to know. And now I'm going to be living with him for the rest of my childhood, and just him. So what more can he do? Just us without my mom being there? It was horrifying.
Yeah. And then with the neighbor, you said that started around 4th grade, was it as well?
He started younger, 3rd grade, a little
Okay.
younger, but yeah, about the same time.
And was he just friends with your dad, or was he also in the police?
He wasn't in the police, so my grandpa was part of this cult. He still is, which trickled down to my dad.
Okay. She's trying to be really low key or whatever, but she's making sense. Okay, she's making sense. So she's saying it's her dad, and then now and a neighbor, but suddenly she's bringing the grandfather into it and the bloodlines. Okay.
And they live about a block from each other.
Mm-hmm.
And then where the area where this was happening in the woods, they lived very close to the location site. So in order to get higher on the chain, cults have a chain, you're the highest up where you start. lowest. So my dad was somewhere in the middle because he was the chief of police, or he was in the police. He wasn't the chief at the time. He had more power, he had more resources. He was in a good location spot, and he was generational in bloodline. So he had a little bit more going for him, which put him in the middle of the cult. So to get higher up, you recruit people, and he, my neighbor at the time, was this alcoholic, very angry, just hitting dogs, hitting people. So my dad was like, this is a perfect opportunity, you know? So he took him in under his wing, tag teamed with him, and brought him into the cult, which gives him more points or whatever you want to call it.
And can you describe and kind of explain from your experience, I guess, how the satanic cults are ran, like kind of the ins and outs of them?
Yeah.
Because I feel like I've heard the term, but I've never really had it explained or someone with firsthand experience.
So California, New Jersey, New York are the main trafficking and cult areas. It happens all over the country. This is just one of the small towns that trickle into the bigger abuse. So it's based off seasons. It's a seasonal cult. It happens in the fall, the spring, not in the winter, not in the summer. That's when it happens. They go by seasons. They have their own special calendar about what they do. They wear masks. That's like an important thing, is they always would wear these masks with bones or whatever they wanted.
Okay, she's got a lot to say with specificity, so I'm going to back it up just a second. If you're doing your bullet points or taking notes, uh, you can do your bullet points in your notes and take note of the point she's making. We can do a comparison of that at a later time. Let's see. So she's saying, let's see. Oh God, I'm failing at this. Okay.
I've been kind of explain from your experience, I guess, how the satanic cults are ran, like kind of the ins and outs of them.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I've heard the term, but I've never really had it explained or someone with firsthand experience.
So California, New Jersey, New York are the main trafficking and cult areas. It happens all over the country. This is just one of the small towns that trickle into the bigger abuse. So it's based off seasons. It's a seasonal cult. It happens in the fall, the spring, not in the winter, not in the summer.
Okay. Seasonal, fall, spring, not winter or summer.
That's when it happens. They go by seasons. They have their own special calendar about what they do. They wear masks. That's like an important thing, is they always would wear these masks with bones or whatever they wanted
Masks with bones or whatever they want. Masks.
to scare you. And it was also a power thing, is I have this mask on, I look more powerful. I killed this animal. So what they would do essentially is we would go into the woods and we would play games, which were not games, and we would have to watch. There's a lot of fire. It was very fire cult. A lot of fire would go on, a lot of burnings of animal skins, humans as well. What scared us the most is, okay, we're doing this to these people that we've trafficked. Why won't we do this to you? You know, you need to be scared for your life, because we just did that to this young girl or this young boy. So why wouldn't we do it to you if you're not acting well?
So they were like actually burning young kids.
Yeah.
So it was, this cult was intertwined with trafficking.
Yes.
Okay.
That's how it
And
worked.
do you know that, like, in their mind, what were these sacrifices doing for them? Like, just giving them more power?
I think a really weird aspect of it is when you're a child and you're going through this, you're kind of just trying to survive. So
Yeah.
I'm there, and I always said, you know what, the more
See, that makes sense to me, sounds authentic too. From her perspective, all she knows, she's trying to survive these episodes, okay, or whatever.
you close your eyes, the better. When the big sacrifices were happening, or anything. If I can close my eyes, I'm going to close them. So I would close them. The less I see, the better it is. The less I hear, the better it is. The less you have to remember and see. So I would do that unless I was forced to keep my eyes open during these games, events, abuse. I never quite understood what the point was as a kid. I just was trying to survive more than anything, and I knew it was they wanted to take this. It gave them more power. It was a thrill for them. Taking kids' blood is essentially something they would do.
Taking kids' blood. She kind of just like everything she's so nonchalant about, but yeah, taking kids' blood.
And how long would these sacrifices last usually? Do you know?
Go on about an hour or
Okay.
so. It depended on the holiday, it depended on the event, but going through it as a kid is, I didn't need to understand, and I was so young, and I was put into this as this is what normal is. Your father is doing this. This is kind of normal, and I knew it wasn't normal or right, and I wanted to speak up, but I didn't know any differently since I was born. You want to love your parent. So after this, now that I've gotten older, I've gotten out of it, I've been doing more research on what was I really a part of? What was I in? And it's very interesting to be like, wow, this is what they were doing. You
Yeah.
know, just going online and doing research of what I was really a part of and not just being there. Because when you're there, you're trying to survive and nothing else.
Would your mom go to these sacrifices?
No. My mom was not aware of the sacrifices. My mom would be sleeping. My dad, as a police officer, groomed my mom since she was 19. I think they started dating was the age. And he kind of just was always like, yeah, you never need to worry about cameras being in the house. You never need to lock the doors. You don't need to worry about sexual assault. Why would you be worried about this? I'm a police officer. I'll tell you. And she truly did believe him. She came from a upper class family and didn't know any differently.
Did she know that he was in a cult at all, or
No.
okay?
So she didn't know
She was
until
very
I
like
was
removed from the situation.
She was totally removed, which is a little bit different with our story. Is she wasn't in it at all. There was no part of her.
Okay.
He could have been giving her sedatives like he gave us every night.
Right.
We
He
don't
just
know.
was controlling basically.
But he
all
was
of you guys.
controlling
Yeah.
this, and yeah, most domestic violence cases, the mother's abused and then the kids are abused. But so she wasn't abused, like mentally, yes, but physically, no. She was never
Okay.
physically abused, as of my knowledge, and as she's spoken.
Mhm.
Which is why she had no idea. So when I was 16, I had to get vaginal surgery. I've had 2 vaginal surgeries.
Okay.
When I turned 12, I was in a lot of vaginal pain, and I would be leaking, UTIs, constant issues, endless pain. I went to a couple doctors. They'd be like, it's normal. We don't really know what's going on. And I'd be like, okay. Once I turned 16, I was like, something's really just wrong. I know I'm in pain. Like, this just isn't right. I had clitoral adhesions from the abuse done, which they can't say for sure because they don't know. But it's usually with a lot of clitoral usage, which wasn't done by me. It was done by my father, unfortunately. And then I had adhesions where I had to get a minor surgery, put knocked under at 16, which is when my abuse kind of started all pouring out, and I started speaking to my mother about it, and when she first heard about what was really going on and why we were sick.
And what was her reaction to that?
At first she wasn't in denial, but there's a part of you that wants to be in denial. She believed us, she listened to us, but she didn't fully believe it. She just kind of was like, okay, yeah, sure. Like, you know, I'm here for you.
And all of your siblings come out at the same time, or was it just you?
All similar times. So first it started with me and my older sister. She knew I had been sexually abused, and she's like, well, yes, the same thing happened to me. And me and her came out at the same time, and we didn't want to bother my younger sibling. And then it wasn't until DCP&P, Child Protective Services, came over that he started spilling out his memories after that. When we were children, the sedatives that my father was giving us was making us so so sick. There were days where I would walk up the staircase and I would fall over. Like walking up the stairs was so hard for me. I would just
Sedatives.
get lightheaded and fall over and have to
Drugging
lay
the
on the
kids with
ground.
the
I couldn't
sedatives,
shower. My
allegedly.
sister, when she was in 7th grade, my older one, she turned completely for 6 months not able to function. She couldn't walk, she couldn't move, she could barely talk. She had severe brain fog. She was stuck on our couch. She would lay on our couch, and I thought she was going to die. So my mother took her to endless doctors. She took us to all like a handful of doctors, being like, what is wrong with my kids? I was acting out mentally. My older sister was physically dying, in a sense. She couldn't move. She didn't shower for months. What's going on, Like, what happened? And my dad just kind of sat there like, doesn't matter to me. Take him to doctors. So we were essentially being failed. And no doctors, which is a really important part, is nobody asked us if we were ever being abused. And I wonder what the outcome would have been if we were asked. I went to a therapist since I was at a young age to around 6th grade, Lorna Goldberg in Englewood, New Jersey. She was a cult specialist.
Okay, notice she names the therapist. So this is not a an anonymous fantastical person as she's inserting into the story. Okay, she's naming the doctor, the location of the doctor, and now explaining the context. So I'm just saying this is another thing that lends some credibility to it, in my opinion.
For young adolescents. She knew my dad as well before me, and she never asked me if I was being abused. She never asked me, and doctors would assume it. They would tell them my therapist to ask me. She never did. I told her I wanted to be treated like I was an abused dog. Basically, I was trying to say I was abused without saying I'm being abused. I was like, I want to be treated like an abused dog because I feel like that. I was never once asked, and I was failed horrifically by not only her, but by a psychiatrist who was giving me medication. She met with me 3-4 times a week. Nancy Tancer for our money, and I was severely suicidal. As a 12-year-old, you don't really know how to kill yourself. Luckily, I was young enough to not know how to do it, but I knew I wanted to die. So for me, it would be holding your breath till you pass out thinking you'd die, which wouldn't work. Not drinking water to die. All silly things that never would have worked or did work, but she told me, you have too much anxiety to kill yourself, straight to my face while I was 12, saying I'm going to kill myself. And right after that moment, I'm looking at her. I was like, you know what? You don't think I can kill myself? Now I'm going to kill myself because you don't think I'm capable. What the hell?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
So how long did you go to her for?
Not very long.
Okay.
My mom is she's very smart. She advocated for us, and she realized this wasn't the right place for me. She sent me to a program, Nancy Tancer, called High Focus, which was essentially a day program, not a mental hospital where you go. It left me more traumatized than I did not. I just needed help, and they sent me there. And all they cared about was just the money and having you there for the day. It felt like I was a prisoner, and I was just a young girl who was hearing all these horrific stories of people trying to kill themselves. So it wasn't until then that I learned, okay, yeah, this is how I could kill myself. So that night I did come home, and I was like, I'm going to kill myself, and I'm going to do it. And my parents had a very close watch on me at the time, luckily. And unluckily, because my father was watching me, but that was when I had to take a Xanax to fall asleep, and I fell asleep with my father in the bed, touching me, and just it all went blurry from there.
And how old were you when that happened?
12. I was in the 6th grade.
And
Okay. Okay, so what I'm going to do now. So again, this is the We're All Insane podcast. Please go subscribe to her channel and watch the rest there. Okay, you can watch the rest of it there. There's plenty more. Trust me. There's too much more. I just can't even. We don't have time to go through it all tonight. But you can go and watch the rest of her story there, and I highly recommend it. Um, but anyway, she was beginning to get into the details of the abuse, okay, and or the alleged abuse. Now, keep in mind, mm, I have to inform you that this this was never handled criminally. So, in other words, her father's the chief of police. So when this was reported, seems like, I mean, you could play devil's advocate, so to speak. You could say option A. Um, it was investigated. It was found to be a nothing burger, and so she's lying. It's all a lie. Investigation proved that, so there were never criminal charges, and blah blah blah. But you could also say option B is it's all true. There was never an investigation because it was a cover up like Delphi. The investigation was sabotaged. The whole truth of the scenario was buried. And so she's coming out civilly with these allegations. And you've got to understand how alarming these allegations are because, just think about it. Look at what she's subjecting herself to, potential risk that she's putting herself in with these allegations as far as defamation, potential some sort of other litigation. Um, Anyhow, I will allow that to stand. Okay, that piece. Um, so next, I'd like to go into some more coverage. Okay, now this right here, what we're going to see is this is some commentary to further enlighten us on the context of what's happening now before we get into the deep dive. So just momentarily, let's see.
Dad and my neighbor were two different types of psychopaths. My neighbor was an alcoholic who just had no mercy, just wanted to beat kids, rape them, assault them. And my dad was a very strategical thinker of how he was going about this, what he was doing, how he's going to do it. It's an organized crime.
That is Courtney Tamagny. And she's talking about the alleged abuse that she claims she suffered at the hands of her own father and neighbor for more than a decade. Now, Courtney recently appeared on the podcast We're All Insane to give insight into this bombshell lawsuit that she filed against not only her alleged abusers, but also the state of New Jersey and the state's Department of Children and Families. So we're talking about Courtney's father. This is John Scott Tamagny, who goes by his middle name, and his neighbor Keith Slevin. They have adamantly denied everything that Courtney has said, saying it is all completely made up, that this lawsuit is causing them huge problems. And before we even dive into the lawsuit itself, I have to give you the background about this. I have to set the stage, give you an idea of just who everyone is that's involved in this drama. So you have 20-year-old Courtney. She's the main plaintiff, and she claims that her father, Scott, started abusing her when she was just 3 or 4 years old, and claimed the abuse continued until she was 15. Now, in an amended complaint, Courtney's mom, Jean Tamagny, was added as a second plaintiff, and she has supported her daughter through her journey with psychologists and other medical professionals. This is, again, according to the lawsuit. In a response that was filed with the court, Scott says that he and Jean, they were married for almost 22 years and that their ongoing divorce battle has been very contentious. So that kind of adds another flavor to all this. Now, Scott has been a police officer for years. He is now the police chief in Leonia, New Jersey. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. Courtney has two sisters, one older, one younger. The older is identified as Sarah. The younger, who was 17 when the complaint was filed in January of 2025, is known by her initials MT. And Courtney claims that all three of them were abused. In her interview with the We're All Insane podcast, Courtney mentions a younger brother as well, but he's not talked about in the lawsuit. So the lawsuit does name several New Jersey agencies, including the Division of Child Protection and Permanency, also known as the DCPP, which is part of the New Jersey Department of Children and Families, or DCF, the Bergen County Prosecutor's Office, and the state of New Jersey itself. And as for individuals named, as for the second amended complaint, there's John Scott Tamagny, Courtney's dad, Keith Slevin, the neighbor, Commissioner of DCF, Christine Norbert Beyer, Joanna Holata, a DCPP investigator, and Sergeant Matthew Sablocki, an investigator for the Bergen County Prosecutor's Office. But Slevin has actually filed a counterclaim against Courtney for defamation, which we'll get into in just a moment. Hey everybody, this is another law and crime legal alert. Did you know that children are being
All right, it's part in the ad here. Anyway, special thank you for the for this coverage though. But we'll let this ad play through, and then we'll get they're going to be right back on it. This is from Law and Crime, by the way.
very serious allegations that Courtney is making in the official court record. So to do that, I want to welcome on criminal defense attorney Mike Korbanix, who I'm shocked to say has never been on Sidebar before, and let alone in studio.
But I started out near Sidebar with you years ago.
I know. Well, good to see you. Thanks for coming in. I appreciate it. Now, before we get started, I want to note that there are no criminal charges that have ever been filed against Scott or Slevin relating to any sort of sexual abuse or assault. These are just the claims that Courtney is making in this lawsuit, and that's what I want to talk about. So the complaint starts out like this, quote, plaintiff Courtney Tamagny brings claims for sexual abuse and failure to protect, depriving her of her constitutional due process rights, her fundamental right to be parented, her right to be free from government conspiracy with private actors to deprive her of her rights. Plaintiff Jean Tamagny brings claims for failure to protect, depriving her of her constitutional due process rights, her fundamental right to parent, her right to be free from government conspiracy with private actors to deprive her of her rights. And the two women are suing under 12 different causes of action. So what do we have?
Okay. Again, the 12 different causes of action here. I'll let them go through it, but you can see it's a lot. It's a hefty suit, right?
Violation of civil rights and 14th Amendment right to parent and familial association, conspiracy to violate defendant's civil rights and 14th Amendment right to parent and familial association, violation of civil rights under due process and equal protection, conspiracy to violate civil rights under due process and equal protection, assault and battery, incestuous abuse, intentional infliction of emotional distress, negligent infliction of emotional distress, breach of parental duty, false imprisonment, invasion of privacy, and transportation of minors to engage in illicit sexual conduct. There's a lot there, Mike. Which one of those stand out to you, or do they all stand out to you?
Well, they all stand out to me because they seem very unusual, because accordingly, but it hasn't been confirmed, there was full investigations into this by the criminal aspect of it, not the civil. This is a civil suit, so there's not as much there right now, but in the sense of an investigation, it's probably still ongoing.
How much does that affect it? Because you know that there's a different, you can have a criminal case have one result and a civil case have a different result. The burden of proof is different. It doesn't necessarily preclude or bar her from bringing a lawsuit, right?
Okay, this is great too. This is actually, let me jump in here. This is a great portion of the discussion. This is why I love this channel. Listen, guys, I always watch Law and Crime because it's a really wonderful program and channel with a lot of resources and good presentation. And so listen to what he says here. That may not be, it should be common knowledge, but many don't understand the legal, the burdens that you have to reach criminal versus civil. So listen here.
No, not at all. I mean, it's beyond a reasonable doubt for a criminal case, and it's just a preponderance of the evidence, which is like over 50% of the evidence in their favor. So this is mostly it's privately bought in a civil case, as opposed to, accordingly, there was investigations here by the prosecutor's office and all these other state panels, and there was no bringing of a criminal case.
What do you make of the alleged violations of constitutional rights or due process rights or parental rights? How does that typically work in a case like this? I mean, I can't say I've seen too many lawsuits from a child against the parents, but those are really interesting legal claims.
Yes, they are, and they're very, very intricate in the fact that they're, like you said, they're not much you hear about all the time, and they're very specific into the allegations that are made there. But I also believe if there was a full investigation by the government, it's much more difficult to bring those kind of claims against the government. However, as to the individuals, you just don't have the higher standard of proof. So it's easier civilly than criminally.
And it's interesting when you look at like intentional infliction of emotional distress or negligence. Sometimes those are, overarching kind of claims that can include a lot of different conduct or alleged conduct. So according to Courtney, her father, Scott, now we're going to get into the allegations, came into her room one night when she was very young, around ages 3 or 4, and assaulted her in her bed. And she says her mother was out of town. She claims the abuse continued, with Scott allegedly cornering her in the shower of the home's basement. According to the lawsuit, quote, defendant father threatened to beat plaintiff Courtney Tamagny and MT if they told anyone. Plaintiff Courtney Tamagny has specific recall of MT crying a lot. MT told plaintiff Courtney Tamagny what he would do with her in the shower, and plaintiff Courtney Tamagny believes her because he did the same thing to plaintiff Courtney Tamagny. Plaintiff Courtney Tamagny has recollection of defendant father forcing her and her sisters to take pills which would cause her to get dizzy and then lose consciousness. Plaintiff Courtney Tamagny recalls defendant father giving her an MT orange juice before bedtime and giving them pills, or sometimes putting pills into the juice. Defendant father
Pills into the juice. All right. Now listen, if you guys think this is a fucking never happens, got news for you. It always happens that when a family member drugs another family member, 99% of the time, it's in the juice, it's in the coffee, it's in the wine, it's in the soda. All right. It's in the soup. So I tend to, I'm taking this kind of in the middle. I'm taking a middle. I'm not one way or the other on this, but I'm saying this part adds up as well. Okay, with drugs in the juice or any sort of liquid.
father also threatened to kill their mother, plaintiff Jean Tamagny, if plaintiff Courtney Tamagny told anyone of these events. I mean, Mike, these are disgusting, serious allegations. And I think on one hand, you wonder, would a daughter, just make all of this up against her father unless there was something here? He hasn't been found liable. He's entitled to a defense. But at the same time, if she goes on the stand, if this is allowed to proceed to trial and survives, let's say, a motion to dismiss, and she just recounts that, and there might not be documentary proof, text messages, videos, anything like that. If she says, I will explain to you what happened when I was a child, can that be enough to secure her a win in front of a jury?
Jesse, as you bring that up, it shows how it seems simple, but when you think about it, it's very complicated.
Right.
Because there's no proof of something that happened when you're 4 or 5 years old, and we're over 20 years later, or close to 20 years later. So it's really just going to be that testimony, unless the father has something to bring against it, which is something that it just seems it's going to be one word against another.
Well, what happens if the mother's supporting her? Does that help?
Well, it only helps if she could support her by confirming what she's saying. So if there was something where she was away, that'll confirm she was away. But as far as whatever actions happened while she was away, she can't testify to.
Well, at some point, the family moved homes. So they were going from Tenafly, New Jersey to Rivervale. And that's when Slevin, this neighbor, allegedly entered the picture as a co-abuser, because the lawsuit reads, quote, plaintiff Courtney Tamagny has specific recall that defendant Slevin was obsessed with plaintiff Courtney Tamagny and had alcohol on his breath. He physically struck plaintiff Courtney Tamagny and had intercourse with her. And then the story takes another turn, with Courtney saying she was raped in the woods as part of some sort of alleged cult.
And here we get to the interesting part, why I chose this for tonight's show. We're going to dive deeper into this later with the filing. But for now, you could almost look at this photo here. This little place here is reminiscent of the ravine at Ron Logan's, is it not?
So from the complaint, it says defendant Slevin and defendant father would take the plaintiff Courtney Tamagny and her sisters, MT and Sarah, into the woods in Rockland County, New York, and there was what appeared to be other middle-aged men present with masks on their faces. She recalls there being fire and animals being burned, and they would chant as if ritualistic. She didn't understand what was being chanted and closed her eyes in avoidance. She was sexually abused in those woods by defendant Slevin, defendant father, and some of the other men present. She recalls MT being struck and seeing MT not being able to run away from the men and being hit multiple times. On the We're All Insane podcast, Courtney told the host that the men in the woods would make the sisters participate in these sick games like hide and seek, where adults would try to find them to harm them.
Listen. If you guys have listened to Big JD, Okay, remember that I had Big JD's information that I published on the community page, et cetera, et cetera. What does Big JD from Delphi allege? The exact same occurrences. As a matter of fact, I wish she was here tonight, but let me back it up just a sec. Let's see.
Participate in these and being hit multiple times. On the We're All Insane podcast, Courtney told the host that the men in the woods would make the sisters participate in these sick games like hide and seek, where adults would try to find them to harm them. She also described drum circles and animals and people being burned in tunnels that allegedly connected different places where abuse had occurred. Now, Mike, these are very wild allegations, but at the same time, is it possible someone could just make all of this up? Or, again, to make a lawsuit like this public, to make these allegations, to put your credibility at issue, to go after your own father and name certain people, you have to wonder whether or not this is credible. But it is quite an allegation.
It is quite an allegation, and you have to wonder if it's credible because of the fact that this person, she has gone under some mental health issues. But another thing that's a little interesting in the fact of how it goes to the proof is the fact that she's including a neighbor. So you would wonder if she was just making it up. Why would you include a neighbor? Just go after your father or something like that.
So good point there. That guy makes a really good, I like this guy, by the way. He makes a really good point. If you're just making this up, first of all, why would you make it up? But beyond that, why would you think to include the neighbor?
I'm saying it adds to the credibility, perhaps.
Perhaps, or it just adds to the need to further investigate it by both sides.
By the way, from a point of view, if she presents this case to a lawyer and says, I want you to file this lawsuit, what is the job of the lawyer to validate those claims at the beginning of a lawsuit, right? I mean, obviously there's going to be discovery, you'll get information from the other side, but should a lawyer just take any case? Or do they have a duty to investigate it before they file it?
Well, I don't believe a lawyer should take any case. You should have to have some, you have some ethical obligations to see if there's credibility to move forward. We can't predict where it's going to go, but you need to look at it and say, is there something here that could lead to further investigation?
Oh my God. Guys, I did it. I goofed. I just realized I was in top chat. So here we're an hour in, and I just realized I've been in top chat the whole time. Please check your chats. Make sure you're not in top chat too. Don't do like Prof. Don't do like Prof. Please don't do like me. Jeez.
And things of that nature. So there has to be some credibility. Doesn't necessarily mean there is, because some lawyers just will take any case, but you need some credibility to file it.
And this is important to know too. So Courtney claims that she suppressed these memories of her sexual abuse, but allegedly had health problems and eventually saw a doctor for it. Quote, the recall of abuse was released when plaintiff Courtney Tamagny was suffering vaginal pain and examined by a doctor who made inquiry about sexual abuse. Plaintiff Courtney Tamagny realized she had been blocking the memory of the abuse, and recall of the abuse started coming back to her. She realized that she had been suppressing the recall of the abuse for years. Courtney says that she started seeing a therapist, and that the therapist then reached out to the Division of Child Protection and Permanency within the DCF. Quote, on February 7th, 2022, a referral was made by plaintiff Courtney Tamagny's therapist to the defendant DCPP about sexual abuse by the defendant father to plaintiff Courtney Tamagny. Plaintiff Courtney Tamagny, then age 17, shared her recalls with her therapist, and a report was made. But Courtney claims she wasn't taken seriously, and that DCF didn't do a proper investigation. Quote, the investigations conducted by defendant's Bergen County Prosecutor's Office, DCPP, DCF, and State of New Jersey, and defendant Holota, including the interviews of the children, were conducted in such a manner as to deprive the plaintiff Courtney Tamagny and her siblings and plaintiff Jean Tamagny of due process and the rights to be free from harassment, and should have been conducted, but were not, by specialized trained professionals with experience in forensic interviews of minor children on the subject matter of sexual abuse. What do you take away from that, Mike?
I find that not to be very credible, quite frankly, because, you know, I'm a former prosecutor. I'm familiar with the Bergen County Prosecutor's Office and all the prosecutor's offices in the state of New Jersey. And to say that they didn't do an investigation is
Or a proper investigation.
is very difficult because every prosecutor's office has a child victim sex crimes unit. They have a sex crimes unit that specializes in that to go further and to do investigation.
Yeah, guy. But if her father's the chief of police, it's highly likely that they would look the other way. Come on.
So I think that's why it may be an allegation. I think it's a difficult allegation to back up. If in fact it was reported to them and reported properly, I'm sure they did an investigation. And also we got to also
Yeah, but he's the chief of police. Come on. Are they going to investigate the chief of police kids like to that extent, like they would any other regular Joe?
look at the fact her father was chief of police in Leonia.
Well, doesn't that work for her benefit? Like, couldn't she make the argument there was a cover-up to protect him?
That's always an argument that could be made, but I also think there's also an argument to be made for the other side of the investigation, saying what prosecutor's office is going to want to allow someone to be a chief of police if he's violating these sexual kind of things.
That's 100% true.
And this is something where if you're doing this, you have some mental disability.
Let me ask you this. Is it possible that there's a gray area where there was an investigation, but they looked into it and they couldn't corroborate anything, and Courtney and her mother are just dissatisfied with the results, and maybe there's not an appreciation for what was required or was not required for such an investigation, and they might just be dissatisfied that there was nothing further and there's really nothing there for them to sue on. I mean, that's a possibility too.
I think that's a strong possibility. I
Okay.
think that's a good point. Because two is just because it didn't reach a criminal standard to go further, there's a less standard in the civil case. So that's up to them what they want to do. And you're also not having anybody other than your lawyer really verifying if you have a good way to go forward.
Let me add something to this. So Courtney had claimed to have flown down to Florida with her older sister, Sarah, to be examined by a Dr. Stephen N. Gold. So as part of his assessment, he wrote, according to the lawsuit, "In conclusion, it is my professional opinion to a reasonable degree of psychological certainty that the abuse described by CT and ST occurred. Their accounts are highly consistent with both the psychological research literature on childhood sexual abuse and my own clinical experience assessing and treating hundreds of adult survivors of childhood abuse over the last 4 decades. In addition, it is my professional opinion that to place MT in her father's custody would put her at serious risk for abuse, and that to force MT to participate reunification at this point in time, even under supervision, would in all likelihood backfire, fostering antipathy and diminishing the likelihood of MT establishing an amicable relationship with her father once she reaches adulthood." And another well-known child abuse pediatrician, Dr. Randall C. Alexander, reportedly agreed with Dr. Gold's analysis, according to the complaint. And the lawsuit went on to list out the harm that Courtney has suffered because of her father and Slevin's alleged abuse. And this list is quite long, but it includes everything from severe mental anguish and loss of capacity for enjoyment of life to eating disorders, nightmares, PTSD, fears of intimacy, sexual contact. And her suit doesn't list a dollar amount that she's seeking, but instead requests appropriate damages. Let's start there. So, Mike, you list out everything you suffered for the purposes of the harm element and for damages. What could that escalate to if a jury believes this?
That could be really unpredictable and extremely high.
Okay, and I want to add this too. Okay, I want to add this. Think about this. She's not requesting a specific dollar amount, which to me lends credibility to her allegations. She's not asking for 5 million, 2 million, 50,000, she's leaving it to discretion of, I don't know, the process or the court. So for me, this little detail does add some credibility to her story. Anyway, I'll leave it here.
Because of the fact is, a human being is developing in their world, and a father who's responsible for that is abusing their own child. It's bad enough to abuse someone who's not your child, but to abuse your own child who you've basically made a promise to take care of and to just use for your own self-gratification is rather scary.
Well, if you have now the backing of these psychological experts, you're already looking at, these are key witnesses at a trial, right? I mean, but from a defense perspective, how would you cross-examine them?
Well, first thing you want to ask them is how much they got paid.
Right.
Because you want to see, are they doing this? It's a little different. That's why it's a lot different in a criminal case, because in a criminal case, the investigation's from the government and they're not getting paid more or less as to what they're doing. Here, your argument would be is, well, didn't you do that so you could just keep charging them to come for therapy and all these sessions and things of that
And you can look at
nature?
their past cases too.
Absolutely, and see how many times they've actually testified
Yeah.
in court. And if they do that a lot, that works both ways, because the plaintiff would argue, yeah, they do it a lot because they're good at what they do. And the defense will be arguing that, well, they do it a lot because that's how they're getting paid and making money.
So now how are Scott and Slevin responding to all of this? Okay, well, Scott filed a motion to dismiss with the court, saying that all of this is part of a smear campaign against him because of this ongoing bitter divorce and custody battle that's lasted years. And the motion points out that while Courtney makes broad statements about alleged abuse, she doesn't provide specific enough examples.
I think I've heard plenty specific examples, but I don't buy the whole thing that this is about a divorce, because why in the hell would this matter in regards to the outcome of a divorce settlement?
And he says the
Or
claims just
agreement.
aren't plausible and they don't meet the burden to file a lawsuit like this, right? So you and I both know from the beginning of law school, right? It has to meet, there's a bare minimum a lawsuit has to meet. You can't, in other words, even if you accept everything is true in a complaint, does it meet the criteria for the elements of the causes of action? You can't just make generalized statements. There has to be some degree of specificity, right?
Yes, absolutely. But in this case, it may be a little bit more approachable for them because of the fact she was going through some mental health issues. She was a child at the point in time.
Good point.
And that she didn't really recall it till she went to therapy again. And there's going to be very interesting as to what the mental therapist says about that, and basically saying because she was so abused, she blocked it out.
It's interesting you say that, because this motion also objects to Dr. Gold's assessment, agreeing that yes, Courtney and Sarah went to Florida to meet with him for several hours, but he didn't do any sort of examination himself. When he gave the analysis included in Courtney's lawsuit, Dr. Gold allegedly hadn't fully gone over the women's therapy notes or spoken with their doctors. And according to Scott's motion, Dr. Gold wrote, "It is not possible for an assessment such as this to categorically conclude whether or not child sexual abuse occurred." Well,
Okay, well, this is garbage too. This particular opinion here seems to be factual. It's like, yes, well, you know, it's a caveat. You often hear these sorts of things in evidentiary findings from specialists, right? It was not possible for an assessment such as this to categorically conclude. In other words, it's not 100%. He's saying it's likely, but not 100%, because it's not possible to be 100%.
there you go. That's how they were going to defend it.
That's a pretty strong defense, because you would say, why wouldn't you evaluate prior people who evaluated this person to see where they're going? But I guess the argument on the other side would be is, I'm the professional doing it. I want to make sure what's going on, and I don't want to rely on what somebody else did because I don't know how accurate that is.
Now, the Department of Children and Families, they also filed a motion to dismiss, citing sovereign immunity from the federal government, interfering with state court determinations related to custody, as well as qualified immunity for Bayer and Halota. The DCF motion also notes the basis of plaintiffs' constitutional claims relate to an alleged inadequate child abuse investigation. However, there is no recognized constitutional right to an adequate investigation. Are they right?
I'm not extremely familiar with
Okay.
that, but you have to have a point of immunity, because you shouldn't have someone prosecuting a criminal case with all these constitutional rights because they're worried that if they don't do it, they're going to get in trouble. So you need to have that sort of freedom in your evaluation.
Yeah, and then, by the way, Keith Slevin filed a request with the court that he be allowed to proceed under a pseudonym. The motion states KS is a professional who may experience a great deal of harassment, adverse employment action, as well as danger to his person and well-being. if his
Okay,
name
okay,
is
this
not removed.
this is where the adults want their names removed. They want to proceed forward as John Doe's, but no, too late.
From the complaint. The judge actually denied that motion on June 12th because, generally speaking, is it hard to ask for a pseudonym, or is it like your name's already out there? I don't know.
Well, it's a public record. Your name's already out there. There's obviously already shown some level of proof that this is a valid complaint. Whether it gets dismissed or not, you don't know. But look at this. That's why we're here most of the time, is because the names are released of the people who are important or the people who are public recognized.
And he also filed a counterclaim, writing, Keith Slevin has been exposed to public ridicule and held in disrepute among counterclaimant's professional colleagues and clients, causing counterclaimant to suffer extreme embarrassment and humiliation and severe mental distress, all to counterclaimant's damage. So he's suing for many of his own claims against both Courtney and her mother, including malicious abuse.
Okay, here's your counterclaims.
Of power, defamation, malicious prosecution, false light, intentional infliction of emotional distress, negligent infliction of emotional distress, and harassment. And in a statement, Kevin Corsten, Slevin's attorney, told the New York Post, it's made up out of whole cloth. This entire complaint was previously investigated by everybody from Homeland Security to the Attorney General's office in New Jersey to the Bergen County Prosecutor's office, and they found no basis at all for these outrageous allegations. Having got no satisfaction from law enforcement, she now decided to sue all the people who were involved in the investigation.
So what is the deal there, though? I've been thinking about this the past week as I've been contemplating this show, is what do you do? What do you do when there's no evidence whatsoever of what has transpired? But you know it to be true, they know it to be true, and others have knowledge that it's true, but you don't have any evidence. Then it becomes word against word. Can a jury evaluate word against word? Well, yes. And then you compound that with the various doctors. She says she's undergone several sexual organ or surgeries on her sexual organs. That should be able to be proven, the surgeries, the evaluations, the blah, 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 blah. So she should have evidence, contextual evidence to back up her story, but the meat of it, there's not going to be any evidence. So it's very interesting here to me.
These claims are on their face unbelievable. There was no way in this world that there was some sort of secret satanic child sex cult operating out of Riverdale, New Jersey. By the way, we think Corson actually meant to say Rivervale instead of Riverdale, just pointing it out. This is a fantasy made up in her mind. Scott's attorney also shared similar statements saying the allegations are completely false and defamatory, and the case is now moving forward right now in federal court. Real quick before we wrap things up, I can understand filing counterclaims. However, for defamation, typically speaking, you can't really file a claim for what somebody alleges in a lawsuit, unless everybody would file a claim for defamation. Mm-hmm. Is it only for statements she made outside of the lawsuit?
Yeah, I would say so because she's going on these podcasts making public statements in addition to the lawsuit.
For example, on a podcast, is that what you could file defamation for?
I believe so, but it also could, we'd have to see how accurate it is when they're saying it in the courtroom, because if you're saying something that's totally a lie under oath, you're violating the law.
All right. Will be interesting to see what happens. It's just quite an allegation, quite a series of disturbing accusations. But Mike Corbanic, it's good to see you. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure, Jesse.
And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.
All right, guys, Law and Crime Network. It's an amazing network. Go subscribe if you're not. Good one. Thank you guys for allowing me that. The Law and Crime Network and Jesse Weber. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Amazing story there, and a nice discussion between those two gentlemen. Okay. Yeah, there are two other kids in the case too, so keep that in mind. It's not just this Courtney. It's her two siblings. So maybe we'll find out. Okay, maybe we'll find out. I think this will be. I mean, this story tends to have legs, or to me, it appears to have legs, and it appears to have kind of like this I don't know, this viral nature or value. It appears to me that this story will continue to move forward because it has that hook in it with the accused, one of the accused being a chief of police, with the whole ritual satanic abuse in the woods scenario. It appears to have this same sort of I don't know the right terminology at the moment to use, but it has this sparkle, okay, sort of like Delphi. Let's be real here. Let's be right. Be real. Delphi has these same star qualities to it, which is why it's such a magnetic case to the public, and there's so much interest in it. Okay, um, so I really appreciate those excerpts from those two programs. Again, that's called "We're All Insane," the "We're All Insane" podcast, and the Law and Crime Network. They did great jobs um, at sort of giving the meat on this story, so to speak. And so now, what I'd like to do. I'd like to go into the filings now because I think it's very important that we actually take a look. And I'm telling you, like I said, these documents are very, very, very difficult to access. In case you don't know that yet, these were very difficult to access, and they were also so they were so alarming or controversial um, that I had to go and redact a large number of words from these documents because these documents are hefty. Okay, so let's move in to this. Okay, um, let's move into this. All right. Now you'll see the date on this. Well, we're sort of going to go backwards. Okay, I must admit, what we're going to do is sort of move in reverse, and the reason we're going to do that is that uh, as of just what 2 or 3 days ago, okay, this original complaint has been amended. Okay, this has been amended, and so I figured that it would be much better to go through this amended complaint than the original complaint, and it's sort of hot off the presses, and I would like to take a look because it's more comprehensive and it has a little more detail. We're going to take a look at this amended complaint, and um, and that's what it is. Okay, so let's see. So you'll see here. This is the daughter and mother. Okay, Courtney and Jeannie or Jean. All right. So you guys ready? It's time for reading. Get ready for reading time. Okay, let's see. We're going to pull this up and get into it. Okay, this says plaintiff Courtney Tamagny brings claims for sexual abuse and failure to protect, depriving her of her constitutional due process rights, her fundamental right to be parented, her right to be free from government conspiracy with private actors to deprive her of her rights. Plaintiff Jean Tamagny brings claims for failure to protect, depriving her of her constitutional due process rights, her fundamental right to parent, her right to be free from government conspiracy with private actors to deprive her of her rights. The court has original jurisdiction over this matter because plaintiff's claims arise under the Constitution of the United States of America, thus raising multiple federal questions. The court has jurisdiction because this action seeks to redress for deprivation of constitutionally protected rights by those acting under the color of state law. So, see, these are constitutional arguments here. This court has jurisdiction to grant the declaratory and injunctive relief sought pursuant to the U.S. codes of the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure and by the general legal and equitable powers of this court. This court has jurisdiction over plaintiffs' claims for attorney's fees pursuant to 42 U.S. Code 1988. Venue proper in this jurisdiction pursuant to 28 U.S. Code 1391B 1 and 2 because plaintiffs and defendants reside in this district and all the defendants are residents of New Jersey. Plaintiff Courtney Tamagny is the middle of three children of the defendant father, John Scott Tamagny, and plaintiff mother, Jean Tamagny. The oldest sibling is Sarah Tamagny, and the youngest sibling is MT, who is the age of 17 and yet a minor. Both Sarah and plaintiff Courtney Tamagny are emancipated. Plaintiffs are domiciled in Bergen County, New Jersey. The 14th Amendment states that no state shall deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Included within the due process clause is the right to parent and the right to be parented. Plaintiffs assert that their rights, as protected by the U.S. Constitution, have been violated. The Department of Children and Families. Ooh, this is getting thick here now. This is getting thick here now. Department of Children and Families is the state's first cabinet-level agency devoted exclusively to serving and supporting at-risk children and families. Defendant Division of Child Protection and Permanency. Division of Child Protection and Permanency. Ooh, is a division within the Defendant Department of Children and Families and maintains a local office. Defendant Christine Beyer is the commissioner of the Department of Children and Family Services and maintains her offices. Defendant Joanna Holota is an investigator for Defendant DCPP, Division of Child and Protection and Permanency, and maintains an office. At all times relevant herein, the Bergen County Prosecutor's Office was and continues to be the chief law enforcement entity in the County of Bergen, organized under the laws of the state of New Jersey, and is in charge of law enforcement and public safety for the County of Bergen. The defendant Bergen County Prosecutor's Office is located in Hackensack, New Jersey, okay, and was and is acting as an agent of the state of New Jersey when it engaged in the law enforcement actions described herein. Defendant Sergeant Matthew Zablotsky is an investigator for the Bergen County Prosecutor's Office, charged with investigating the events herein, and maintains an office at the defendant Bergen County Prosecutor's Office. The defendant state of New Jersey is a public entity and is sued for wrongs committed by and through the Division of Criminal Justice, which pursuant to New Jersey law is housed within the Department of Law and Public Safety under the supervision of the Office of the Attorney General of New Jersey with office at Station Plaza Building. Defendant State of New Jersey, Bergen County Prosecutor's Office, DCF, DCPP, Holota, Zablotsky, and Beyer are hereinafter referred to as state actors. I mean, state defendants. Pardon me. Pardon me. The individual state actors, I mean, defendants, were persons as defined within 42 USCA Section 1983 and were at all times mentioned herein acting under the color of law. This is why it becomes a constitutional civil rights case. Okay. Defendant Scott Tamagny, hereinafter referred to as father, is the father of plaintiff, and his occupation was and is chief of police in the township of Leonia. He is presently estranged from the plaintiff's mother, Jean Tamagny. Both plaintiff Jean Tamagny and defendant Scott Tamagny, plaintiff Courtney Tamagny's father, are involved in marital litigation pending in Superior Court entitled John Scott Tamagny v. Jean Tamagny. Defendant father resides in New Jersey. Defendant Keith Slevin, hereinafter Slevin, is an individual who resides in New Jersey. Defendant John Doe, Jane Doe's, and XYZ Corpse 1 through 10. That's 1 through 10. Individuals 1 through 10 are individuals or business entities whose identities are not yet known who participated in the act. So what she's alleging here, okay? You're going to see further that these other 10 individuals are 10 John Does who the plaintiff here is alleging participated in these sexual assault scenarios during the course of satanic ritual abuse in the woods in New Jersey. Okay, let's continue. Okay, let's continue. Let's see. Plaintiff Courtney Tammany was sexually abused and assaulted by defendant father and defendant Slevin. The abuse occurred while she was a minor. Plaintiff Courtney Tammany was a minor child between the ages of 4 and 15. The facts upon which this complaint is based are as verified by the accompanying affidavit and our documents are as follows. Plaintiff Courtney Tammany's earliest memory of sexual abuse occurred when she was 4 or 5 years old. On a day when her plaintiff mother, Jean Tammany, was not home. Plaintiff Courtney Tammany shared the left bedroom in their home in Tenafly with her older sister Sarah. Plaintiff Courtney Tammany recalls defendant father getting into bed with plaintiff Courtney Tammany without any clothes and touching her redacted area, rubbing it gently. Plaintiff Courtney Tammany has specific recall on other occasions of the defendant father entering the shower with plaintiff Courtney Tammany while she was showering and showing her his redacted. MT and plaintiff Courtney Tammany showered together, and defendant father entered the shower with both of them and touched their redacted with his fingers. He would make them both touch his redacted. When alone with plaintiff Courtney Tammany, he would also sometimes penetrate plaintiff Courtney Tammany redacted in the shower, and sometimes it was rubbing with his fingers and not penetration. Defendant father threatened to beat plaintiff Courtney Tammany and MT if they told anyone. Plaintiff Courtney Tammany has specific recall of MT crying a lot. MT told plaintiff Courtney Tammany what he would do with her in the shower, and plaintiff Courtney Tammany believes her because he did the same thing to plaintiff Courtney Tammany. Plaintiff Courtney Tammany has recollection of defendant father forcing her and her sisters to take pills, which would cause her to get dizzy and then lose consciousness. Plaintiff Courtney Tammany recalls defendant father giving her an MT orange juice before bedtime and giving them pills or sometimes putting pills into the juice. Plaintiff Courtney Tammany recalls a neighboring friend of the defendant father, defendant Keith Slevin, sexually assaulting her with the defendant father watching. That sounds like the P. Diddy allegations, does it not? She recalls screaming for defendant Slevin to stop because of the pain, but to no avail. She recalls other times the defendant father and his friend would tag team and sexually assault plaintiff Courtney Tammany by redacted and redacted penetration. Defendant Slevin particularly engaged in redacted penetration, and plaintiff Courtney Tammany has a specific memory of pain while he did so. MT told plaintiff Courtney Tammany that they did this to her as well. And plaintiff Courtney Tammany believes her because they did the same thing to plaintiff Courtney Tammany. Defendant father also threatened to unalive their mother, plaintiff Jean Tammany, if plaintiff Courtney Tammany told anyone of these events. Plaintiff Courtney Tammany has specific recall of being in the basement of their home with defendant father and both siblings, including MT. Plaintiff Courtney Tammany recalls that it was when she was in the 4th grade. Plaintiff Courtney Tammany was unable to move and face the staircase as she was lying on the couch in the basement. She watched as MT was being sexually assaulted by the defendant father, who was pinning her to the ground and touching her and penetrating her redacted. Defendant father insisted that she watch what he was doing to her. Plaintiff Courtney Tammany was unable to move to try and help. Defendant father threatened to beat them if they said anything. Defendant father took pictures of both MT and plaintiff Courtney Tammany while they slept and showed it to them to show his control over them. Now listen, who would think, now before we continue, think about this. People, please. What kind of liar would think? What kind of liar would think to make up this lie? That under number G here, letter G, defendant father took pictures of both sisters while they slept and showed it to them to show his control over them. What kind of children or teenagers would think up that particular detail to insert into this lie? Another particular occasion, on another particular occasion, plaintiff Courtney Tamany has specific recall of being in the 7th grade. Plaintiff and MT were in home with the defendant father alone. Defendant father was angry about the dog being dirty and yelled at them and hit them, took them to the family room. Defendant father grabbed MT's shoulders and hit her and touched her in her redacted area under her pants with his fingers. Plaintiff Courtney Tamany tried to intervene but was unable to help and felt hopeless. Plaintiff Courtney Tamany has specific recall that defendant Slevin was obsessed with plaintiff Courtney Tamany and had alcohol in his breath. He physically struck plaintiff Courtney Tamany and had intercourse with her. Defendant Slevin and defendant father would take the plaintiff Courtney Tamany and her sisters MT and Sarah into the woods in Rockland County, New York. And there was what appeared to be other middle-aged men present with masks on their faces. She recalls there being fire and animals being burned, and they would chant as if ritualistic. Again, defendant Slevin and defendant father would take the plaintiff Courtney Tamany and her sisters MT and Sarah into the woods in Rockland County, New York. And there was what appeared to be other middle-aged men present with masks on their faces. She recalls there being fire and animals being burned, and they would chant as if ritualistic. She did not understand what was being chanted and closed her eyes in avoidance. She was sexually assaulted in these woods by defendant Slevin, defendant father, and some of the other men present. She recalls MT being struck and seeing MT not being able to run away from the men and being hit multiple times. She saw MT being redacted, penetrated with fingers, or a redacted and redacted as well. Plaintiff Courtney Tamany has specific memory of defendant father using his nightstick to strike plaintiff and MT. Plaintiff Courtney Tamany wishes she could suppress the memories and tries to do so to avoid the reality of being abused. When she could, plaintiff Courtney Tamany would close her eyes while the abuse was happening as an avoidance mechanism, as if the trauma would go away if she didn't see it. Plaintiff Courtney Tamany recalls when defendant father left the marital home, she and her sister started having a lot of flashbacks, causing them to have suicidal ideations. Plaintiff Jean Tamany, plaintiff Courtney Tamany's mother, has been a stabilizing support and would stay with her and her sisters to comfort them. The recall of abuse was released when plaintiff Courtney Tamany was suffering redacted pain and examined by a doctor who made inquiry about sexual abuse. Plaintiff Courtney Tamany realized she had been blocking the memory of the abuse, and recall of the abuse started coming back to her. She realized she had been suppressing the recall of the abuse for years. Plaintiff Courtney Tamany recalls that her mother did not want to believe the abuse and was in denial. Plaintiff Courtney Tamany recalls her younger sister MT as having the worst flashbacks of the 3 siblings. She would be shaking, crying, and hiding in the closet. Plaintiff Courtney Tamany recalls the abuse stopping in the year 2020 when she was 15 years of age. Plaintiff Courtney Tamany recalls the acts of sexual abuse of her and her sister MT by the defendant father to include redacted penetration, and stimulation of the redacted. As for abusive acts by the defendant Slevin, she recalled redacted penetration and physical striking. Plaintiff Courtney Tamany recalls speaking to the defendant father as a law enforcement officer because his occupation was and is chief of police in the township of Leonia. She asked him to take action against defendant Slevin. He did not, but stated he will keep defendant Slevin away from her. Now listen to that. It's another detail. I want you to ask yourself these questions. Even though she claimed she was being abused by the father, because the father was a police officer and specifically chief of police, she went to father with complaints of the neighbor defendant Slevin and asked father to keep the defendant Slevin away from her and to take action against him. And her father did not take action against him, but stated that he would keep the defendant away from her. So what kind of liar would think to add that detail? It's a very important question for you to really exercise some critical thought and some critical thinking kind of around and think it out, work through it and think for yourself. Would she think to add the lie that I told my dad, please arrest that guy or please keep him away from me? And so he chose to not arrest the guy, but to keep him away. It's an interesting detail that she added there in letter Q there. Anyway, let's continue. On February 7, 2022, a referral was made by plaintiff Courtney Tamany's therapist to the defendant DCPP about sexual abuse by the defendant father to plaintiff Courtney Tamany. Plaintiff Courtney Tamany, then age 17, shared her recalls with her therapist and a report was made. So listen to that. Okay, that's an important point. Let's go back there to letter R. It says on February 7, 2022, a referral was made by plaintiff Courtney Tamany's therapist to the defendant DCPP about sexual abuse by the defendant father to plaintiff Courtney Tamany. Plaintiff Courtney Tamany, then age 17, shared her recalls with her therapist and a report was made. Defendant Holota was the lead investigator on behalf of defendant DCPP. Defendant Bergen prosecutor's office also investigated together with defendant DCPP. Despite interviewing plaintiff Courtney Tamany's siblings, the state defendants took no action to protect plaintiff Courtney Tamany or her sisters. Sorry, I need a little drink of water. Okay, now let's get back to it. The investigations conducted by Defendant Bergen County Prosecutor's Office, DCPP, DCF, and the state of New Jersey and Defendant Holota, including the interviews of the children, were conducted in such a manner as to deprive the plaintiff Courtney Tamany and her siblings and plaintiff Jean Tamany of due process and their rights to be free from harassment, and should have been conducted, but were not, by specialized trained professionals with experience in forensic interviews of minor children on the subject matter of sexual abuse. Another important point there, okay? Number 17, the sexual assault and battery and sexual abuse by defendant's father and Slevin, as described above, caused the plaintiff Courtney Tamany to develop severe psychological mechanisms, including, but not limited to, denial, repression, accommodation, and disassociation, which prevented the plaintiff Courtney Tamany from perceiving, knowing, or understanding the existence and nature of the injuries alleged in this complaint, and of their causal connection to the defendant's earlier acts of sexual assault, battery, and abuse, not until the gynecological exam of May of 2021, when plaintiff Courtney Tamagny was asked by the doctor about sexual abuse. Plaintiff Courtney Tamagny began to receive intensive psychotherapy and treatment for severe emotional problems. She was able to connect the sexual assault, battery, and abuse to her injuries. Dr. Stephen N. Gold was asked to reassess or to assess plaintiff Courtney Tamagny and her older sister Sarah. See the copy of the report of Dr. Stephen N. Gold attached as Exhibit A, which for respecting medical privacy, I'm not going to read for you, but I'll continue with this, what is quoted here in this filing. He states in this report that it has been alleged by both CT and ST that they and their sister MT, the youngest daughter of Mr. and Mrs. Tamagny and a minor child, were repeatedly sexually molested throughout their childhood and adolescence by their father and other men in the community. Attorney Stratus requested that I evaluate CT and ST to assess their respective reports of childhood sexual abuse, which could challenge the advisability of reunification between Mr. Tamagny and his minor daughter, MT. Attorney Stratus advised me that there has been no contact between father and youngest daughter in 2 years. As to CT's allegation of abuse, Dr. Gold stated, when I asked CT to name the sexual acts that comprised that abuse by her father, she identified them as redacted, and stimulations of the redacted. When I questioned her about the abusive acts by Mr. Slevin, she indicated they were redacted from behind and redacted. As to Sarah's allegation of abuse, Dr. Gold states, okay, now before we get into this, let me clarify here as well. This portion here, remember, now we're going into the sister. Okay, this is not Courtney now. Now we're going into the older sister. Listen to the older sister's allegations here. He raped me. I asked if that was primarily what would happen, and she replied affirmatively, I then asked what she would do to him, and she replied, redacted. She answered affirmatively when asked if she remembered CT being there when the abuse was happening, in other words, the rape, and if she remembered CT being abused. By this time, she was lying on her side on the couch in my office in a near fetal position. Continuing, regarding MT, Sarah told Dr. Gold, again, this is the older sister, when I asked her whether she knows for a fact that MT was molested, she replied affirmatively. And when asked how she knows this, she stated, with remembering my abuse when I first remembered it, it was like in a movie. I just felt it like in my bones. I just knew it to be true. And I can't remember. I might have written about it. I don't remember if I had specific flashbacks involving MT. I just knew in my bones. I was always protective of both my sisters, but CT was always the feisty one. I always felt protective of MT and petrified that something was going to happen to her, that she was going to die horribly. Dr. Gold concludes, in conclusion, it is my professional opinion, to a reasonable degree of psychological certainty, that the abuse described by CT and ST occurred. Their accounts are highly consistent with both the psychological research literature on childhood sexual abuse and my own clinical experience assessing and treating hundreds of adult survivors of childhood abuse over the last 4 decades. And remember, both of these young ladies are adults. In addition, it is my professional opinion that to place MT in her father's custody, remember, she's 17 years old now, would put her at serious risk for abuse, and that to force MT to participate in reunification at this point in time, even under supervision, would in all likelihood backfire, fostering antipathy and diminishing the likelihood of MT establishing an amicable relationship with her father once she reaches adulthood, which would be in the next year. The country's number 24 at the bottom here. The country's leading child abuse pediatrician, Dr. Randall C. Alexander, MD, PhD, conducted an evaluation. So listen to that. Okay, put your listening ears on. I'll read it for you very, clearly. The country's leading child abuse pediatrician, Dr. Randall C. Alexander, MD, PhD, conducted an evaluation. He is a University of Florida professor of pediatrics and a board-certified specialist in child abuse pediatrics. He serves as chief of the University of Florida Division of Child Protection and Forensic Pediatrics in Jacksonville, as well as program director of the Child Abuse Pediatrics Fellowship Training Program. He is a former chief Division of Child Protection and Forensic Pediatrician at the University of Florida, and until recently, Dr. Alexander was the statewide medical director of the Florida Child Protection Teams. Dr. Alexander opined as to probable sexual abuse, and I quote, "I agree with Dr. Gold in his analysis." See report of Dr. Randall Alexander dated June 25th, 2024 as attached as Exhibit B. And again, we're going to skip that because of privacy concerns. But keep in mind that that this doctor is supporting Dr. Gold's findings. Okay, let's continue. Defendant has repeatedly sexually and physically abused plaintiff Courtney Tamagny in violation of NJSA codes, New Jersey Criminal Code. Defendant father violated U.S. Code, which explicitly states that it is illegal to travel for the purpose of engaging in illicit sexual conduct. Specifically, U.S. Code prohibits a person from knowingly taking a minor child out of the state or country with the intent that the child engage in illegal sexual activity. So if he's bringing her across state lines to the woods in New York, that is transporting the minor across state lines for the sexual abuse. At all times relevant herein, defendants Breyer, Zablotsky, and Holota knew or should have known about the customs and practices of defendants Bergen County Prosecutor's Office, DCPP, DCF, and State of New Jersey to A, listen here, I'll blow it up so you can see it better. Okay. Again, the defendant should have known that the customs of the county prosecutor's office, okay, the DCPP and the DCF and the state to suppress and ignore child welfare reports of physical and sexual abuse, retaliate against the protective parent, the parent who did not commit the abuse, ignore and disregard evidence of physical abuse and sexual abuse, conspire with and engage with others to disregard and ignore evidence of abuse, conspire with and engage with the offending parent to suppress. Again, this is chief of police. Let's put it that way. Let's word it. Clearly. Okay. To conspire with and engage with the chief of police to suppress, disregard, and hide the evidence of abuse. Ooh, that's a rough one, right? That's a rough one. Maintaining a custom of an inadequate training of personnel and incomplete investigation into matters which inevitably result in failed investigations into reports of harm to child and then resulted in the continued exposure to further harm to the child. Deliberately ignoring harm to the child and relabeling as a custody dispute, and there are differences in parenting instead of investigating the harm to the child and protecting the child from further harm, which also resulted in moving the burden of protection to the mother, who is then exposed to and attacked for trying to protect your children from harm. Okay? Causing the constitutional violations of the plaintiffs as complained of herein. Okay? The numerous wrongful acts described herein above and elsewhere in this complaint are for illustration and not limitation, and form the predicate basis for claims here and against all defendants, as establishing that defendants Bergen County Prosecutor's Office, DCPP, DCF, and State of New Jersey, as well as defendant Halota, Zablotsky, and Bayer knew or should have known that the children were in danger in defendant's father's chief of police's care, and the defendant father, the chief of police, committed acts of sexual and physical abuse. At all times relevant herein, plaintiffs were entitled to certain rights and protections which were denied to her by the customs and practices of the defendant's Bergen County's Prosecutor's Office, DCPP, DCF, and State of New Jersey, and acts of the individual defendants described herein. In all respects set forth in this complaint, each defendant or each state defendant or each state actor, let me correct it. Each state actor acted under the color of law of the laws of the state of New Jersey. By their acts and omissions, defendants proximately caused the injuries as alleged herein. The defendant's acts and omissions were a material element and or substantial factor in bringing harm about to the plaintiffs. The harms sustained by the plaintiffs were a reasonably foreseeable result of the defendant's improper acts and omissions. Defendants, each of them, acted in a willful, wanton, reckless, or grossly negligent manner, and their conduct shocks the conscience. Again, remember, this is the discussion of the state actors, right, who failed to seriously address these allegations of abuse. By the foregoing, these defendants are liable for the plaintiff's injuries pursuant to New Jersey or NJSA 5911. These defendants are jointly and severally or severely liable for the injuries sustained by plaintiffs. Sorry, I think I'm reading too much now. I'm getting tired. So before we continue, you see what the lowdown here is? The lowdown, the meat of this portion of the complaint is that all of the state actors, from the prosecutor's office to the Department of Families to the Department of Protection and Preservation, all of the Department of Children's Family Services and on up to the prosecutors, failed to protect the children in this case, and the assumption is that they did so because they were choosing to protect the chief of police and the other individuals alleged to be involved in this abuse. Sounds very similar to Delphi, does it not? Very, very akin to what we believe has happened with Delphi. Okay, count one, violation of civil rights pursuant to 42 USCA section 1981 and 1983, the 14th Amendment right to parent and to familial association, defendants Bergen County Prosecutor's Office, DCPP, DCF, and State of New Jersey, and defendants Halota and Bayer. Okay. Plaintiff repeats the statement set forth in the preceding paragraph as if set forth herein at length. Plaintiffs are informed and believe, and thereon allege, that the right to familial association guaranteed under the 14th Amendment is clearly established, and such a reasonable investigator in defendant Halota and Zablotsky's position, and that the Bergen County Prosecutor's Office would know it is unlawful to conduct sham investigations as to child abuse, to collude with others, and to misrepresent the nature of their limited inquiry as having satisfied Title IX or other standard investigations and other established report procedures, and to fail in their statutory duties to provide for the protection of an abused child, and or to fail to aid the plaintiffs. Woo, that one's a heavy one. I believe that's pretty heavy there. Okay. In addition, there's a clearly established due process right not to have to carry the burden of protection of an abused child, as is the state defendant's statutory duty pursuant to Title IX of the New Jersey statutes, okay, which mandates that the state safety of New Jersey's children must be of paramount concern of the courts. Okay. Quoting, the purpose of this act is to provide for the protection of children under 18 years of age who have had serious injury inflicted upon them by other than accidental means. The safety of the children served shall be of paramount concern. It is the intent of this legislation to assure that the lives of innocent children are immediately safeguarded from further injury and possible death, and that the legal rights of such children are fully protected. Plaintiffs have the right to investigations by qualified individuals based on qualified inquiries and not on the basis of false information and misrepresentations that was without foundation, negligently prepared, and that was deliberately fabricated by state defendants. At all times relevant herein and continuing until this present time, the state was acting under color of state law when they acted, agreed, and or conspired to unlawfully examine, investigate, and make false reports, resulting in the failure to protect defendants. Woo! That's heavy too. The state defendants did so without proper justification or authority and without probable cause. Further, their actions were taken with deliberate indifference to the plaintiff's rights and without regard to the truth or falsity of the evidence and materials presented of sexual abuse. Defendants Holota, Zablosky, and Bayer conspired to violate the civil rights of plaintiffs, including violation of plaintiffs' rights found in the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, by way of example, but not limited to manufacturing, misrepresenting, and or concealing evidence and testimony, thus violating due rights of the plaintiff, due process rights. I think, hey, maybe instead of Baldwin and Rozzi, maybe we should have had these attorneys here on the Delphi case. They seem to be making a much more substantial argument, right? This seems to be heavy. By these actions, defendants, state actors, each of them interfered and or attempted to interfere with plaintiffs' constitutional rights to familial association under the 14th Amendment, as well as those rights under applicable New Jersey law rising to the level of constitutionally protected rights. As a direct and proximate result of the defendant's Bergen County Prosecutor's Office, DCPP, DCF, and State of New Jersey actions, and those of defendants Holota, Zablotsky, and Bayer, plaintiffs have suffered and will continue to suffer physical, mental, and emotional injury, all to the extent and in the amount subject to proof at trial. Plaintiffs have incurred and will continue to incur special damages, medical bills, and expenses incidental thereto, and has incurred and will continue to incur attorney's fees, costs, and expenses, including those authorized by 42 U.S. Code Section 1988 to the extent and an amount subject to proof at trial. Okay. All right. Count two. Okay. Count two. Violation of 42 USCA Section 1985 and 442 USCA Section 1986 against all defendants for conspiracy to violate plaintiff's civil rights under 42 USCA Section 1981 and 1983 and the 14th Amendment's right to parent and familial association. Plaintiff repeats the statement set forth in the preceding paragraphs as if set forth herein at length. Excuse me. All right. Geez, that one made me I got a hot flash and I had such a severe sneeze that feel 10 degrees warmer. All right. Thank you very much. Defendants Bergen County Prosecutor's Office, DCPP, DCF, and State of New Jersey, and defendants Halota, Zablotsky, and Byer, acting under color of state law, conspired with the defendant father, the chief of police. The state actors conspired with the father, the chief of police, and Slevin, and did deprive plaintiffs of their rights under the laws of the United States. Specifically, defendants Bergen County Prosecutor's Office, DCPP, DCF, and State of New Jersey, and defendants Halota, Zablotsky, and Byer conspired to and did act, agree, and or conspire to unlawfully misrepresent, make false statements and reports, and purposely failed to conduct a thorough investigation of sexual and physical abuse of minors, specifically plaintiff Courtney Tamagny and her siblings. These defendants conspired and used trickery, fabrication, and or false testimony or evidence and failed to conduct a thorough investigation and failed to recognize compelling evidence in preparing and presenting their reports. Ooh, sounds just like Delphi, does it not? Does it not? The conduct of the defendants, state actors, and each of them interfered with plaintiffs' rights, including the right to familial association free from government interference, as guaranteed by the 14th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States. Defendants Bergen County Prosecutor's Office, DCPP, DCF, and State of New Jersey, and defendants Halota, Zablotsky, and Byer engaged in said conspiracies for the purpose of depriving plaintiffs of equal protection of the laws of the State of New Jersey and of the United States, and depriving them of their due process rights under the Constitution of the United States and the State of New Jersey. Defendants Bergen County Prosecutor's Office, DCPP, DCF, and the State of New Jersey, and Halota, Zablotsky, and Byer, and each of them took several acts in the furtherance of the conspiracy, including but not limited to acting, agreeing, and or conspiring to unlawful misrepresent, make false statements and reports, and purposely fail to conduct a thorough investigation of sexual and physical abuse, depriving the plaintiffs of their rights here and described herein. Plaintiffs did, in fact, suffer the deprivation of numerous rights granted to the citizens of the United States, including those under the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment, which has been interpreted to protect fundamental liberty. As a direct and proximate result of defendants Bergen County Prosecutor's Office, DCPP, DCF, State of New Jersey, defendants Halota, Zablotsky, and Byer's actions, plaintiffs suffered and will continue to suffer physical, mental, and emotional injury, all to the extent and any amount subject to proof the trial. Plaintiffs have also incurred and will continue to incur attorney's fees, costs, and expenses, including those authorized by 42 U.S. Code Section 1988 to an extent and an amount subject to proof at trial. Count 3, violation of civil rights. Okay, under 42 USCA section 1981 and 83, under due process and equal protection against defendants DCPP and DCF and defendant Halota Bayer, state of New Jersey. And okay, at this point forward, I'm just going to say state actors. In engaging in the conduct specified above, the defendants, state actors, acting under color of law, deprived plaintiffs of the rights and liberties secured to them by the Constitution and the laws of the United States and the state of New Jersey, including but not limited to rights secured by the plaintiffs by the 4th, 8th, and 14th Amendments of the United States Constitution and 42 U.S. Code or USCA Section 1983, including the right to liberty, familial association, the right of due process of law. As a direct and proximate result of defendants' conduct, plaintiffs have suffered damages, including but not limited to damage and impairment to their person, personal anxiety, mental anguish and suffering, emotional distress, physical suffering, loss of enjoyment of life, loss of income, cost to plaintiffs against these accusations, and the amount yet to be determined, but in excess of the jurisdictional minimums of this court. Count 4, a violation of 42 USCA section 1985, 42 USCA 1986 against all state defendants for conspiracy to violate plaintiff's civil rights. Okay, under 42 USCA section 81 and 83, under due process and equal protection. Plaintiff repeats statements set forth in the preceding paragraphs. Defendants, all the state actors, acting under the color of state law, conspired with defendant, father, chief of police, Tamagny, and Slevin, and did deprive plaintiffs of their rights under the laws of the U.S. Specifically, defendants conspired to and did act, agree, and conspire to unlawfully misrepresent, make false statements and reports, and purposefully failed to conduct a thorough investigation of sexual and physical abuse of minors, specifically plaintiff Courtney Tamagny and her siblings. The defendants, the state actors, conspired to use trickery, fabrication, and or false testimony or false evidence, and failed to conduct a thorough investigation and failed to recognize compelling evidence in preparing and presenting reports. The conduct of the defendants and each of them interfered with plaintiffs' rights as defined above. The defendants, who are all state actors mentioned above, engaged in said conspiracies for the purpose of depriving plaintiffs of equal protection of the laws of the state of New Jersey and of the United States, and depriving her of her due process rights under the Constitution of the United States and the state of New Jersey. Defendants, each of them, took several acts in furtherance of the conspiracy, including but not limited to acting, agreeing, and or conspiring to unlawfully misrepresent, make false statements and reports, and purposely failed to conduct a thorough investigation of the sexual and physical abuse, depriving the plaintiffs of the rights here and described herein. Plaintiffs did in fact suffer the deprivation of numerous rights granted to citizens of the U.S., including those under the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment, which has been interpreted to protect fundamental liberty. As a direct and proximate result of the state actors, defendants, plaintiffs have suffered and will continue to suffer physical, mental, and emotional injury, all to the extent and the amount subject to proof the trial. The plaintiffs have also incurred and will continue to incur attorney's fees and costs and expenses, included those authorized by 42 U.S.C. Section 1988, to an extent and amount subject to proof at trial. Assault and battery. Plaintiff Courtney Tamagny repeats the statement set forth. She brings this action against a defendant, father, chief of police, and neighbor, defendant Slevin, for damages sustained as a result of defendant's violently physical and sexual abuse and assault and battery of plaintiff Courtney Tamagny over a period of many years while plaintiff Courtney Tamany was a minor child between the ages of 4 and 15. Defendant's father in Slevin subjected plaintiff Courtney Tamany to such assault and battery and abuse continuously from 2009 through 2020 as set forth above. At all times mentioned in this complaint, plaintiff Courtney Tamany was in the care, custody, and control of defendant father. Due to her youth and the parent-child relationship between plaintiff Courtney Tamany and defendant father, plaintiff Courtney Tamany was in complete and continued emotional and financial dependence on defendant father and reasonably relied on defendant father to take care of her, love her, and act in her best interest. At all times mentioned in this complaint, and as a result of the parent-child relationship between plaintiff Courtney Tamany and defendant father occupied a position of fiduciary to the plaintiff Courtney Tamany, owing plaintiff Courtney Tamany a relationship of confidence and trust. As set forth above, when plaintiff Courtney Tamany was a minor child, defendant father began a pattern of practice of forced sexual relations with plaintiff Courtney Tamany, consisting of redacted penetration, and stimulations of the redacted. As for abusive acts by defendant Slevin, she recalled redacted penetration and redacted penetration. Defendant's father in Slevin subjected plaintiff Courtney Tamany to such assault and battery and abuse continuously from that date through and until 2020. On numerous occasions, defendant's father in Slevin kept plaintiff Courtney Tamany against her will in the basement, in the shower, in the woods, in Rockland County, New York, and other locations, and force her to engage in the sexual acts described above. During the course of sexual assault and battery and abuse described above, defendant's father in Slevin intentionally and maliciously threatened the plaintiff Courtney Tamany with great bodily harm, causing her to be in fear for her life, and further inflicted injury on the plaintiff Courtney Tamany through intentional, malicious, unjustified, harmful, and offensive sexual contact without plaintiff Courtney Tamany's consent. At all times mentioned in this complaint, defendant father in Slevin was in a complete or position of complete authority over plaintiff Courtney Tamany. From this position of authority, defendant's father and Slevin exerted their dominance through mental and physical coercion and duress on plaintiff Courtney Tamany in order to force her to engage in the sexual acts described above. At no time did plaintiff Courtney Tamany consent to the acts of the defendant's father and Slevin. Defendant's acts of sexual assault and battery and abuse as described above were carried out in secret, away from the sight and knowledge of other adults, which conduct caused the plaintiff Courtney Tamany to feel trapped, isolated, alone, and cut off from others, and rendered her incompetent and incapable of bringing suit at the time the sexual abuse occurred. At all times mentioned herein, defendant's father and Slevin directly or indirectly subjected plaintiff Courtney Tamany to physical force, intimidation, threats, and duress to ensure the secrecy of the ongoing sexual assaults and abuse described above. At all times mentioned in this complaint, defendant's father and Slevin misrepresented and concealed from plaintiff Courtney Tamany the wrongful nature of their sexual assaults and abuse. The wrongful actions and sexual assaults and battery and abuse by defendants as described above caused plaintiff Courtney Tamany to develop severe psychological mechanisms, including but not limited to denial, repression, accommodation, and disassociation, by which she separated herself from the acts being done to her body. As a result, plaintiff Courtney Tamany subconsciously repressed and denied the existence and, most significantly, the impact of the sexual assaults from, at, or about the time of each event until a gynecological exam when psychological therapy enabled her to remember the incidents. Until plaintiff Courtney Tamany received psychological therapy, she had no knowledge that she had been injured and that her injuries were caused by the wrongful actions and sexual assaults and battery and abuse inflicted on her by defendants described above. At all times mentioned in this complaint, and until plaintiff Courtney Tammany discovered through psychotherapy the causal relations or connections between the defendant's acts and plaintiff Courtney Tammany's injuries, plaintiff Courtney Tammany was disabled and under such a condition of mental derangement as to actually bar her from comprehending the rights to which she was otherwise bound to know. As a result of such disability, plaintiff Courtney Tammany was rendered incompetent and incapable of bringing suit at the time the acts of sexual assault and battery and abuse described above occurred. Plaintiff Courtney Tammany used all due diligence given the nature, extent, and severity of her psychological injuries and the circumstances of their infliction to discover the fact that she had been sexually assaulted, battered, and abused and injured by such wrongful actions. As a direct and proximate result of defendant Father and Slevin's wrongful actions and sexual assaults and batteries and abuse described above, plaintiff Courtney Tammany has suffered permanent, severe, and continuing injuries, including but not limited to academic and employment impairments, depression, low self-esteem and confidence, suicidal tendencies, physical and psychological trauma, pain and suffering, severe mental anguish, loss of capacity for enjoyment of life, loss of earnings and earning capacity, emotional distress, marital difficulties, inability to function normally in social situations, especially in relationships with men, fear of physical contact, inability to trust others, difficulty forming meaningful relationships, fears of intimacy and sexual contact, eating disorders, nightmares, debilitating terror, repression and memories of emotions, post-traumatic stress disorder, humiliation, anxiety, embarrassment, and psychological denial, repression, accommodation, and disassociation, all to plaintiff Courtney Tammany's damage. As further direct and proximate result of defendant Father and Slevin's wrongful actions, sexual assaults and batteries and abuses described above, plaintiff Courtney Tammany has incurred and will continue to incur expenses for hospitalization, medical care and treatment, psychological therapy, psychiatric therapy, and medication, all to plaintiff Courtney Tammany's further damage. The conduct of defendants, as described above, was intentional, reckless, grossly negligent, willful, wanton, oppressive, and done with actual malice and disregard for plaintiff Courtney Tammany's rights and safety. As a result, plaintiff Courtney Tammany is entitled to an award of punitive damages. Unless defendant is restrained and enjoined from contacting plaintiff Courtney Tammany, plaintiff Courtney Tammany will suffer irreparable injury for which she has no adequate remedy at law. Wherefore, plaintiff Courtney Tammany requests judgment against defendant as set forth below. Count 6, incestuous abuse. Plaintiff Courtney Tammany alleges or realleges the preceding paragraphs of this complaint as if set forth in full here. Due to the familial relationship between plaintiff Courtney Tammany and defendant Tammany and the age of plaintiff Courtney Tammany when the acts of sexual abuse described above occurred, defendant Tammany's sexual abuse constituted incestuous abuse of a minor child as defined in NJSA 2C14-2A. Wherefore, plaintiff Courtney Tammany requests judgment against defendants Father and Slevin as set forth below. Count 7, intentional infliction of emotional distress. Plaintiff Courtney Tammany realleges the preceding paragraphs of the complaint as if set forth in full below. Defendant's Father and Slevin knew or in the exercise of reasonable care should have known that his sexual assaults and battery and abuse of plaintiff would result in serious emotional distress to plaintiff Courtney Tammany. In doing the acts alleged above, defendant's Father and Slevin acted with willful, wanton, reckless, intentional, and deliberate disregard for the likelihood that plaintiff Courtney Tammany would suffer severe emotional distress as a direct and proximate result of the sexual abuse of plaintiff Courtney Tammany. Defendant Father's and Slevin's conduct, as alleged above, was extreme and outrageous and went beyond all bounds of decency. as a direct and proximate result of defendant's wrongful actions and sexual assaults and battery and abuse described above, plaintiff Courtney Tamany suffered severe emotional distress. Wherefore, plaintiff Courtney Tamany requests judgment against defendant's father and Slevin as set forth below. Negligent infliction of emotional distress. Defendant's father and Slevin knew, or in the exercise of reasonable care should have known, that his sexual assaults and battery and abuse of plaintiff Courtney Tamany would result in serious emotional distress. Defendant father as plaintiff Courtney Tamany's father and defendant Slevin as a trusted neighbor, in whom was placed plaintiff Courtney Tamany's confidence and trust, owed a duty to plaintiff Courtney Tamany to refrain from sexually assaulting and abusing her. Defendant's father and Slevin negligently and carelessly breached that duty by negligently and carelessly engaging in acts of sexual assault, battery, and abuse. In disregard for the likelihood that plaintiff Courtney Tamany would suffer severe emotional distress as a direct and proximate result of the sexual abuse. Defendant father and Slevin's conduct, as alleged above, was extreme and outrageous, went beyond all bounds of decency. As a direct and proximate result of father and Slevin's negligence and carelessness, as described above, plaintiff Courtney Tamany suffered severe emotional distress. Plaintiff Courtney Tamany requests judgment against defendant father and Slevin as set forth above. Breach of parental duty. Plaintiff Courtney Tamany realleges a proceeding paragraphs as set forth above. Defendant father as plaintiff Courtney Tamany's father, and in whom was placed plaintiff Courtney Tamany's confidence and trust, owed a duty to plaintiff Courtney Tamany to take care of, love, and act in the best interest of plaintiff Courtney Tamany. The 14th Amendment states, no state shall deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Included within the due process clause is the right to parent and the right to be parented. Defendant father breached the parental duty he owed to plaintiff Courtney Tamany by engaging in the wrongful acts and sexual assault, battery, and abuse of plaintiff Courtney Tamany. Defendant father violated her due process rights. Wherefore, plaintiff Courtney Tamany requests judgment against defendant father is set forth below. Count 10, false imprisonment. Plaintiff Courtney Tamany realleges the preceding paragraphs of this complaint as if set forth in full here. In doing the acts alleged above, defendant's father and Slevin falsely and unlawfully imprisoned plaintiff Courtney Tamany against her will. Wherefore, plaintiff Courtney Tamany requests judgment against defendant's father and Slevin as set forth. Invasion of privacy, count 11. Plaintiff realleges the preceding paragraphs as if set forth in full. Defendant's father and Slevin's wrongful actions and sexual assaults and battery and abuse of plaintiff, as described above, were an invasion of plaintiff Courtney Tamany's privacy and were done in malicious and wanton disregard of Tamany's feelings, character, and reputation. As a direct and proximate result of defendant father's and Slevin's invasion of her privacy, as described above, plaintiff Courtney Tamany suffered embarrassment, public ridicule, humiliation, and mental pain and anguish. Wherefore, plaintiff Courtney Tamany requests judgment against defendant as set forth below. Count 12, transportation of minors. Defendant father and Slevin's wrongful actions and sexual assaults and battery and abuse of plaintiff Courtney Tamany, as described above, violate 18 U.S.C. Section 2423, which explicitly states that it is illegal to travel for the purpose of engaging in illicit sexual conduct. Specifically, 18 U.S. Code Section 2423A prohibits a person from knowingly taking a minor child out of the state or country with the intent that the child engage in illegal sexual activity. Defendant's father and Slevin willfully transported plaintiff Courtney Tamany across state lines out of New Jersey and into the state of New York, specifically Rockland County, for the purpose of engaging in illegal sexual activity, and violated 18 U.S.C. 2423, causing plaintiff Courtney Tamany to suffer embarrassment, public ridicule, humiliation, and mental pain and anguish. Wherefore, Plaintiff Courtney Tammany requests judgment against defendants, father and Slevin, as set forth below. Prayer for relief. Wherefore, plaintiffs pray for judgment against the defendants jointly and severally, or severely, jointly and severally as follows. I don't know what the hell is trying to say here. Plaintiffs demand judgment against defendants for an award of damages, including those that are compensatory and punitive, as well as pecuniary, and an award of all fees and costs, including counsel fees, interest, and legal fees, pursuant to the federal and state law on all counts where so permitted, and for prejudgment interest, and for such further and other relief the court deems just, equitable, and proper. Okay, now, my comment here. Like I said earlier, the funny thing about that, she's not asking for a particular dollar amount, but she's asking for all equitable relief. Okay. Now, let's see what else I need to do. Here we go. Now, here's another. Like I said, we're going to go back in time a bit. This is to May. We're going back to May 16th. Okay, let me come up here for a minute. We're going to May 16th for a moment because we're going to read the brief in opposition to defendant's motion to dismiss. So obviously, the defendant filed a motion to dismiss. I'm not going to read it, but for future reference, we can take a look at it at some point in the future. But I found most interesting this here, the brief in opposition. Okay, so I figured before we get out of here, we'll cover this brief in opposition rapidly, and then we'll get out of here. But in this brief in opposition, we're going to cover a few more points, right? So here we go. There's no basis for dismissal of claims against Jean Tammany, as she asserts no claims against defendant Scott Tammany in the complaint or amended complaint. All claims by plaintiff Jean Tammany are against the state defendants only. Okay? She asserts no claims on counts 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, or 12. All claims against defendant John Scott Tammany or by plaintiff Courtney Tammany, not plaintiff Jean Tammany. Counts 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 all arise from the sexual assault and abuse of plaintiff Courtney Tammany by defendant John Scott Tammany and defendant Slevin. Plaintiff Jean Tammany does not assert that she was sexually abused by the defendants. Statement of facts. Plaintiff incorporates by reference the facts set forth in the verified complaint and amended verified complaints, exhibits A and B attached to the certification of defendant's counsel. That's we just read that complaint. Okay. By way of summary and as a preliminary statement, plaintiffs collectively sue the defendants and the state. This is what I mean, the state actors. Okay. And those individuals associated with these agencies and offices, collectively the state defendants, for violation of civil rights pursuant to 42 U.S. Code. Section 1983, and set forth in the 14th Amendment, which states, no state shall deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Included within the due process clause is the right to parent and the right to be parented. Plaintiffs assert that their rights as protected by the U.S. Constitution have been violated. Plaintiff Courtney Tammany is daughter of plaintiff Jean Tammany and daughter of defendant John Scott Tammany, hereinafter father, asserts and verifies that she was sexually abused and assaulted by defendant father and defendant Keith Slevin. The abuse occurred while she was a minor and for years thereafter until she was 15 years of age. The facts upon which this complaint is based, as verified by the affidavit attached to this complaint, are set forth in the complaint at length and include specific details of sexual abuse, including redacted and digital penetration and sexual touching by defendant father and defendant Slevin. Attached to the complaint are reports from experts opining that, quote, in conclusion, it is my professional opinion to a reasonable degree of psychological certainty that the abuse described by the two sisters occurred. Okay, the two adult sisters. Legal standard. A FRCP 12B6 motion to dismiss should only be granted if the plaintiff is unable to articulate enough facts to state a claim of relief that is plausible on its face. In reviewing a motion to dismiss pursuant to FRCP 12B6, a court may consider the allegations of the complaint as well as documents attached to or specifically referenced in the complaint, the matters of public record. Some of this is still under seal, by the way. Okay. A court must accept as true all allegations in the complaint and all reasonable inferences that can be drawn therefrom, and view them in the light most favorable to the non-moving party. The question is whether the claimant can prove any set of facts consistent with his or her allegations that will entitle him or her to relief, not whether the person will ultimately prevail. A motion to dismiss a complaint will be granted only when, taking the allegations in the complaint and all reasonable inferences therefrom as true, the plaintiff can prove no set of facts that would entitle him or her to relief. Legal argument. Point 1. Plaintiff has sufficiently pled her cause of action. When considering a motion to dismiss a complaint for failure to state a claim upon which relief can be granted, a court must accept all well-pleaded allegations in the complaint as true and view them in the light most favorable to the plaintiff. It is well settled that a pleading is sufficient if it contains, quote, a short and plain statement of the claim showing that the pleader is entitled to relief, close quotation. However, although the federal rules of civil procedure do not require a claimant to set forth an intricately detailed description of the asserted basis for relief, they do require that the pleadings give the defendant fair notice of what the plaintiff's claim is and the grounds upon which it rests. A district court, in weighing a motion to dismiss, asks not whether the plaintiff will ultimately prevail, but whether the claimant is entitled to offer evidence to support the claim. The Third Circuit applies a two-part analysis in reviewing a complaint under Rule 12b6. First, a district court must accept all of the complaint's well-pleaded facts as true, but may disregard any legal conclusions. Second, a district court must determine whether the facts alleged in the complaint are sufficient to show that the plaintiff has a plausible claim for relief. However, the standard does not impose a probability requirement at the pleading stage, but instead simply calls for enough facts to raise a reasonable expectation that discovery will reveal evidence of the necessary element. A complaint attacked by Rule 12b6 motion to dismiss does not need detailed factual allegations. Assuming the factual allegations in the complaint are true, those factual allegations must be enough to raise a right to relief above the speculative level. To survive a motion to dismiss, a complaint must contain sufficient factual matter accepted as true to state a claim for relief that is plausible on its face. A claim has facial plausibility when the pleaded factual content allows the court to draw the reasonable inference that the defendant is liable for the misconduct alleged. This plausibility standard requires the complaint to allege more than a sheer possibility that a defendant has acted unlawfully, but it is not akin to a probability requirement. Detailed factual allegations are not required, but more than an unadorned the defendant harmed me accusation must be pled. It must include further factual enhancement, not just conclusory statements or a recitation of the elements of the cause of action. Determining whether a complaint states a plausible claim for relief is a context-specific task that requires the reviewing court to draw on its judicial experience and common sense. Where the well-pleaded facts do not permit the court to infer more than the mere possibility of misconduct the complaint has alleged, but it has not shown that the pleader is entitled to relief, However, courts are not compelled to accept unsupported conclusions and unwarranted inferences, nor a legal conclusion couched as factual allegation. Plaintiff has certainly alleged more than a sheer possibility that a defendant has acted unlawfully and has included further factual enhancement, and not just a conclusory statement or a recitation of the elements of a cause of action. As with any motion to dismiss, the question is whether the plaintiff has been unable to articulate enough facts to state a claim to relief that is plausible on its face. Therefore, a court must accept as true all allegations in the complaint and all reasonable inferences that can be drawn therefrom and view them in the light most favorable to the non-moving party. As such, plaintiff's claims should survive defendant's motion to dismiss. Here, plaintiff has sufficiently pled and stated her cause of action. She has certainly stated a plausible claim for relief. She verifies as true that she was sexually abused, that state defendants were notified and did nothing to protect her or her siblings. Pertinent to the motion to dismiss by defendant father, plaintiff verifies that he was sexually assaulting her for years, both with redacted and digital penetration, while having a relationship with her as a father. Counts 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 all arise from the sexual assault and abuse of plaintiff Courtney Tamagny by defendant John Scott Tamagny and defendant Slevin. The following counts are derived from the sexual abuse suffered by plaintiff Courtney Tamagny, and that's assault and battery, incestuous abuse, intentional infliction of emotional distress, negligent infliction of emotional distress, breach of parental duty, false imprisonment, invasion of privacy, transportation of minors. As verified by plaintiff in the complaint and amended complaint, plaintiff Courtney Tamagny was sexually abused and assaulted by defendant father and defendant Slevin. The abuse occurred while she was a minor. Plaintiff Courtney Tamagny was a minor child between the ages of 4 and 15. The facts upon which this complaint is based, as verified by the accompanying affidavit and or documents, are as follows. Courtney Tamagny's earliest memory of sexual abuse occurred when she was 4 or 5 years old, on a day when her plaintiff mother was not home. She shared the left bedroom. And then here, guys, it goes through the entire thing again, okay? So we will summarize this point by point, okay? This summarizes that the father got into the bed with her at 4 or 5 years old without any clothes and touching her redacted area, rubbing it gently. B, she has specific recall of the father entering the shower with her and showing her his redacted. The younger sister and plaintiff Tamagny showered together, and defendant father entered the shower with both of them and touched their redacteds with his fingers. He would make both of them touch his redacted. When alone, he would also sometimes penetrate Courtney Tamagny's redacted in the shower. Sometimes it was rubbing with his fingers and not penetration. He threatened to beat plaintiff and sister if they told anyone. She recalls sister crying a lot. Okay. She alleges the younger sister told her what the father would do in the shower to her, and she believed it because it was the same thing he did to her. Okay, C. Recollection of the father forcing her and her sisters to take pills, which would get her dizzy and make her lose consciousness. Sometimes giving her orange juice before bed and giving them pills, or sometimes putting pills in the juice. Again, she recalls a neighbor, friend of the father, sexually assaulting her while the father watched. Okay. She recalls screaming for the neighbor to stop, and that sometimes the father and the neighbor would tag team by redacted and redacted penetration, particularly engaging in redacted penetration and the memory of pain, okay? And that the younger sister alleges the same thing, and that plaintiff Tamagny believes the younger sister because it's the same thing that used to happen to her, okay? Defendant father also threatened to kill the mother if she told anyone of the events. Plaintiff has recall of being in the basement of the home with both sisters, and she watched as the younger sister was sexually assaulted and was forced to watch. Okay. Um, Alleges the defendant father took pictures of the sleeping children and showed them to show his ultimate control over them. She also remembers being in seventh grade and being touched in the redacted area and watching the sister be abused as well. She also recalls the neighbor being drunk, having alcohol in his breath, and physically striking her and having forced sexual relations with her. Okay, and furthermore, um, defendant Slevin and the father would take the plaintiff, Courtney Tamagny, and her younger and older sister into the woods. This and remember what I said. This is the part that resonates with Delphi. Okay, it would take the three girls into the woods in Rockland County, New York, and there was what appeared to be other middle-aged men present with masks on their face, and she describes these masks as having bones on them. She recalls there being fire and animals and humans being abused and burned, and that they would chant things that she could not understand as if ritualistic. She didn't understand what was chanted and closed her eyes in avoidance. She claimed she was sexually assaulted in those woods by the gentleman, and that the younger sister and older sister were also sexually abused in those woods. Plaintiff Courtney Tamagny has specific memory of the father using the nightstick on them. Also, she remembers closing her eyes to avoid the experience of the abuse. She recalls that when these memories started coming back because the father left the home, that she started having suicidal ideations, flashbacks, and memories coming back. The recall of abuse was released when she was suffering vaginal pain and examined by a doctor who made the inquiry about whether she had been sexually abused. She then realized the sexual abuse, okay? She recalls her younger sister having worse flashbacks of all three siblings, would be shaking, crying, and hiding in a closet. She remembers that the abuse stopped at 15 years of age. Okay? She alleges that the abuse included redacted penetration, stimulation of the redacted, abusive acts, recalling from the neighbor, including redacted penetration, and physical striking. She recalls recalls asking her father, because he's chief of police, to take action against the neighbor, but he did not, but stated he would keep the neighbor away from her. Okay. On February 7, 2022, her therapist made a referral to the DCPP about sexual abuse by the father and the neighbor, and a report was made. The therapist then gave the report to DCPP, and all the state actors here failed to properly investigate and take care of the allegations. The investigations conducted by these state actors, including the interviews of the children, were conducted in such a manner as to deprive them of their rights to be free from harassment. It should have been conducted by specialized trained professionals with experience in forensic interviews of minor children on the subject of sexual abuse. Based on these verified facts, plaintiff has certainly alleged more than a sheer possibility that the defendant has acted unlawfully, and has included further factual enhancement, not just conclusory statements or a recitation of the elements of cause of action. Plaintiff has been able to articulate enough facts to state a claim to relief that is plausible on its face. Plaintiff has sufficiently stated a claim for conspiracy. Now, this is the other huge part of this. To prevail in a conspiracy claim under Section 1983, a plaintiff must establish that persons acting under the color of state law reached an understanding to deprive him or her of their constitutional rights. Such rights include, of course, those asserted herein, including those protected by the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment, such as the right to familial relationship, the right to have proper investigations, the right to have such investigations conducted in a fair and impartial manner and not in a careless, reckless, or grossly negligent manner, and the right of access to courts. Those rights assure that no person will be denied the opportunity to present to the judiciary allegations concerning violations of constitutional rights. Although deprivations of the right of access to the courts arise when law enforcement officers conspire to cover up constitutional violations, a conspiracy of silence among officers is actionable as a 1983 conspiracy because the coordinated officer conduct impedes an individual's access to the courts. And this, trust me, this should have been done in Delphi. Why was this not done in Delphi? When you had 70 days of deleted shit, all right, when you had destroyed DNA, you had destroyed recordings, you had the marathon station destroyed, you had potential fingerprint evidence destroyed, you had DNA not tested at all, you had phones that were not taken at all for examination. A conspiracy of silence, again, among officers is actionable as a 1983, Section 1983 conspiracy because the coordinated officer conduct impedes an individual's access to courts and renders hollow a victim's right to redress in a court of law. Okay? When police officers conceal or obscure important facts about a crime from its victims, rendering hollow the right to seek redress, constitutional rights are undoubtedly abridged. All right, so what happened to Richard Allen? After a plaintiff establishes that the object of the conspiracy was the deprivation of a federally protected right, the plaintiff must provide some factual basis to support the existence of the elements of a conspiracy, agreement, and concerted action. To show agreement, he must demonstrate that the state actors named as defendants in the complaint somehow reached an understanding to deny the plaintiff his rights. And in absence of direct proof, that meeting of the minds or understanding of agreement to conspire can be inferred from circumstantial evidence. Once again, what happened with Delphi? Such circumstantial evidence may include that the alleged conspirators did or said something to create an understanding, the approximate time when the agreement was made, the specific parties to the agreement, the period of the conspiracy, or the object of the conspiracy. And in the context of an alleged conspiracy among police officers, it may manifest as conversations between officers about the incident, allegedly distorted stories that emerged, and awareness of conflicting stories and irregularities in the series of official investigations into the incident, because inferring mental state from circumstantial evidence is among the chief task of fact finders. An allegation of conspiracy can only be overcome at summary judgment when the moving party's submissions foreclose the possibility of the existence of certain facts from which it would be open to a jury to infer from the circumstances that there had been a meeting of the minds. Likewise, on motion to dismiss, the threshold is even more lenient. Here, a plaintiff verifies the defendant father is the chief of police in Leonia. See paragraph 11 of the amended complaint. Okay, so let's go back. Let's do that. Let's go back to the amended complaint. Let's go to paragraph 11. Nope, this is the wrong one. Okay, forget it. This court can take judicial notice that Leonia is in the county of Bergen, and further that the chief of police is the highest ranking law enforcement officer in the township of Leonia, which is within Bergen County. Obviously, the state defendants, including the Bergen County Prosecutor's Office, is involved in law enforcement within the same county as the defendant father, chief of police. Therefore, at the stage of a motion to dismiss, when the court must consider all reasonable inferences in light of the most favorable light to the plaintiff, the defendant father, chief of police, cannot overcome the allegation of conspiracy when the moving party's submissions foreclose the possibility of the existence of certain facts from which it would be open to a jury to infer from the circumstances that there had been a meeting of the minds. Here, the question for the court is, does the complaint allege enough facts to raise a reasonable expectation that discovery will reveal evidence of the necessary elements of a claim? Then it plausibly pleads a claim. Facts as verified are criminal and not conclusory. Plaintiff verifies that defendant's father and Slevin were sexually assaulting her for years, both with redacted and redacted penetration, while the defendant father was doing so as her father. The facts in the complaint or amended complaint as set forth are criminal in nature and not conclusory. Conceitedly, allegations are conclusory when they are, quote, so threadbare or speculative that they fail to cross the line between the conclusory and the factual, close quotation. And the evaluation of plausibility involves assuming their veracity, construing them in the light most favorable to the plaintiff, and drawing all reasonable inferences in the plaintiff's favor. Remember, this victim is our plaintiff. If after completing the evaluation and determining conclusory statements and plausibility, the complaint alleges, quote, enough facts to raise a reasonable expectation that discovery will reveal evidence of, close quotation, the necessary elements of a claim, then it plausibly pleads a claim. Nonetheless, if the court determines plaintiff has failed to sufficiently plead, that the district court should generally, quote, permit a curative amendment unless an amendment would be inequitable or futile, close quotation. Plaintiff has not pled conclusory statements, but has stated facts and verified same and provided expert opinion. Remember the medical experts here, and that there are more that may be possibly dredged up with discovery if you go into all these doctors. Her claims are factual and certainly sufficient to withstand a motion to dismiss at this stage of the proceedings. Point 4, defendant alludes to material not within the record which must be stricken from consideration. Defendant father makes reference to reports generated by DCP and Audrey Hepburn House and investigatory reports by the defendant's prosecutor's office. None of these are permitted to be considered in a motion to dismiss. See Rule 12D. To decide a motion to dismiss, courts generally consider only the allegations contained in the complaint, exhibits attached to the complaint, and matters of public record. Indeed, on a Rule 12b6 motion, the defendant bears a burden of showing that no claim has been presented. The court may only consider the facts alleged in the pleadings, any attached exhibits, and any matters of judicial notice. Here, references to matter outside the pleadings and the exhibits must be disregarded and not considered by the court. Point 5, leave should be given to permit repleading of the claim if deemed necessary. To the extent plaintiff's claim is found to be deficiently pled by the court, leave should be given to allow the plaintiff to replead that claim. Accordingly, should the court determine that any claim is defective as pled, we respectfully request leave to replead it pursuant to FR Civ Procedure 15A1B2 and D, Grayson v. Mayview State Hospital 293 F3D 108, 3rd edition 2002. Conclusion. Based on the foregoing, it is respectfully requested that the court deny the motion to dismiss. Okay, so guys, whew, now that was a lot. Okay, now that I was very well aware that was going to be a lot when we started. Okay, um, what do you all think? What do y'all think? Do y'all think this is a sheer fantasy that all of these scenarios with this level of specificity were just dreamed up in her mind in order to help her sister not have to go to dad's custody for like, I don't know, 6 more months? I don't know. Like I said, there are a few details in there which lead me to believe that those particular details must be factual because there's no way a kid would think to make that stuff up in my mind. Okay. And by kid, I mean, even if she's 18, okay, she's 18 years old, 19, she's not, her and her siblings are not going to dream up details with that much specificity that would seem irrelevant to someone dreaming up some type of false allegations against the father. Okay. Now, keep in mind, there's a lot, or there are some things which we didn't read to you because they go beyond the pale of what's acceptable on YouTube. Okay. But I think the TLDR is that overall, between the We're All Insane podcast and the Law and Crime Network interview you heard, and all of the readings that I just went through for you, I think you should have a very good idea now of of the probabilities of this scenario here. It's the reason I brought this in are several. Okay, one is that I believe that the similarity to my so I have a theory about what happened to Delphi. Okay, clearly my theory of what happened to Delphi is not the state's theory of what happened to Delphi. It's also not the Mean Girls theory of what happened to Delphi. I have a very specific um, theory of the potential series of events that led to the finding of the bodies of both Abigail Williams and Liberty German in Delphi, Indiana. And I believe that there were many parallels in this complaint here, specifically the bringing of the girls out to the woods where they would be ritualistically sexually abused, and akin to doing things akin to what a Big JD has stated or alleged in the past, that they would bring the kids out to the woods and make them go play hide and seek, and when they got found, they might get beat down or sexually assaulted. And so I think that some parallels of that nature, but I also find that the parallels in the cover-up or the law enforcement response, that when the doctor found the injuries to Miss Courtney Tagme, can't remember how to say her name now. When the doctor found the injuries to Miss Tagme's sexual organs, sent that report into the Department of Child Services and Family Services, and the fact that they failed to take those allegations seriously or those concerns seriously, they failed to investigate it. They came up with some other excuse to dismiss it, so that there would be no criminal look at this. It sounds to me like a conspiracy to cover up. Okay. So I think it's another parallel to Delphi. So it seems like we have two parallel to Delphi's, which is a potential involvement of law enforcement, the potential involvement of Department of Child and Family Services, the Department of, the Sheriff's Department, the Police Department, the state of Indiana, the prosecutor. All of these things sound very, very, very familiar, very akin to what I believe is happening with Delphi. Okay, so those are my thoughts. And that's why I chose to present this tonight. I thought it was very concerning, And additionally, remember, my Thoughts about Delphi also include the potential occult signatures at the crime scene and in the context as a whole regarding particularly what appears to be a particularly uh, mm, I don't know, indicative or reminiscent of sacrifice type of signatures and scenario. And I believe the whole tableau, the way the girls were left with the staging. Remember, it is without a doubt that the way those bodies were posed in Delphi is absolutely specifically a tableau which is reminiscent or reflective of the tarot. Okay, so for certain, the positioning of the bodies or the staging of the bodies in Delphi uh, echo to me the tarot, and then in addition to that, you have the sticks placed in a manner which might cause you to think that there's some sort of further occult ideation involved in that crime scene. Look, there are many reasons to believe so, and honestly, uh, as I look at all the POIs who've been discussed over time, there is an occult bent to all of these POIs. Okay, somewhat of a, I don't know, I would say a meth flavored Satanism imbued witchcraft occult tinge to this whole Delphi murders. And so I found all of that to be mm, similar. Okay. Now, I hope you pay attention to the thumbnail for this stream you're watching at this moment. I chose the thumbnail. I thought it was a good one because notice it's out in the woods. All of the formations are built with sticks. It's an altar, et cetera, et cetera. And if you pay very close attention to the thumbnail, you'll see the bones that are incorporated into the design. Okay. So for a future point, we'll probably get back to that. But I believe the symbolism in the thumbnail would be similar to the symbolism at Delphi, which would be similar to the symbolism that Miss Courtney might have encountered in her experiences in the woods in New York, if all of the above is indeed true. Okay. So thank you so much for commenting, y'all. All right. Yeah, that's a great point, Miss K. Keep in mind that from the age of 14, I'm sorry, from the age of 4 to 14, she should, that's 10 years of medical treatment by gynecologists. Remember, she said she had urinary tract infections. She had other sexual complications. She had the damage to the clitoral area. So she had damage for such a young child. Okay. So there's that as well. So there's a lot to this. So I hope that all of you very well consider this previous 3 hours. Okay. So the preceding 3 hours, I hope all of you understood and you like it and you can take it in and blah, blah, blah. All right. So I want to thank everyone for being here. That was a great night. Listen, please support the channel. Okay, let me see what you guys got in the comments before we get out of here. All right, y'all. So I see what you see. Yeah, and remember that the doctors, as far as the doctors who examined her psychologically, she had a lot of validation from that too. So there's something to it. Yeah, she also described blood harvesting or the taking. Yeah, there was a lot of it. Plus, there was the ravine in the woods. You know, there was a lot of it. So I appreciate you so much for being here. Please support the channel. Listen, I have all of these support pathways here, which is the Cash App, Coffee for Prof, Buy Me a Coffee, the Prof's Crew, Substack, where you can go subscribe for our very special Substack postings. Remember, I said Substack is our new community page, okay? So Substack is readtheprof.substack.com. That's where you can go for all of my updates. It's my new community page, and I wish everyone would go there. And anyway, thank you, Diana, for the Cash App. Or what is that? That's a super chat. By the way, please hit the goal. Look, we're only how many out of 10? We're 3 out of 10 on the goal. So we have our goal. If you want to hit the goal, I do appreciate you hitting the goal. Otherwise, if you're on the replay and watching, please know you can still support the channel at our support pathways. Okay, we got all our support pathways open to you. I also have a GoFundMe. We'll be talking about that next time. And most importantly, if you're on the replay, you can hit the like and leave comments down below, because I just absolutely adore the comment section. I love that this comment section continuously fills up with wonderful comments from the community as they watch the episodes that we cover. So appreciate you all for being here, and my wonderful regulars. You're the dieharders. You know why? Because when we start the show, you're here. And then at the end of the show, you're here. And everyone else who comes through in the middle, they'll come and go. But all of you in the chat right now, you know you're the dieharders. I really appreciate it. And anyway, go subscribe to the All Insane podcast. Okay, go subscribe to what is it called? The Law and Crime. All of a sudden, my mouse is not working. Well, what's going on here? The Law and Crime Network, where you can watch Sidebar with Jesse Weber. Okay. And like I said, we're All Insane podcast. So go subscribe to them. Tell them thank you for allowing us to use their content to show you. Thank you, Miss K, for the super chat. Boom. Super chat. Okay. Now, appreciate that. Anything else? I don't know. Closing words. Closing thoughts. I don't know. It was a good Friday. I'm glad that everyone showed up. I'm glad I was able to do it. I so appreciate you sticking around for this subject matter, because so often, which is insane, but so often, if I don't cover Delphi, no one comes to watch because people are have tunnel vision. Okay, but hopefully those of you who happen to catch this at any point in the future will not only enjoy the Delphi content, you will enjoy all the content that can inform our take on Delphi, which is the ultimate end goal anyway. Okay. Oh, let's see what we got going here. So we got any special messages come through while we've been here? Nope. It's been pretty laid back in my messaging. Okay, so great. No messages to remind ourselves of before we get out of here. But yeah, please support the channel. Please leave a comment below if you're on the replay. This was The Prof, Satanic Ritual Abuse by Cops, the curious case of Courtney Tamagny. Okay. And I think that just about covers it for tonight. So thank you all so much. Thank you, Miss Kay and Becky, for the super chats. We might get our 10 super chat goal. Let me go look and make sure, because I want to be here. Whoa, we hit it. Thank you, Miss Kay. We got Miss Kay. We got Amy. Awesome. Thank you guys for the goal. Miss Kay, Becky, Amy. You girls are really too sweet. That was fun. Okay, we made our little goal, didn't we? Goal achieved. Thank you all. Miss K, you better stop that. See, I don't know why I'm not seeing these as they come. Miss K just one after the other. Thank you, Dirty Diana, for this super chat. Let me go and say hello to everyone who super chat on the way out of here, damn it. We got Ninja Warrior Assassin with the super chat. Thank you, Ninja Warrior. We got Marianne Furcus, Amy, Topher, Diana, Miss K, 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 Becky, Amy, and wow, just thank you so much. So round of applause for all of you. Okay. All of you out there. Also, is it Fur Baby Daddy's birthday? Happy birthday to Fur Baby Daddy, if that's the truth. All right. Okay. All right. Well, God bless Fur Baby Daddy too. Happy birthday, sir. We appreciate you being here. So anyway, I'm out of here, y'all. Wow, what a nice night. Good night. Good night. Okay. I'll see you all soon. We'll do another one soon. Really appreciate it. Have these three sisters in your hearts and in your prayers tonight. Please do. I'm going to leave you out on a very, let's pull this up because I want you to, I'm going to give you some very good advice while you're on your way out.
Well, obviously, we have a rapist in Lincoln Park. He's climbing in your windows. He's snatching your people up, trying to rape them. So y'all need to hide your kids, hide your wife, and hide your husband because they raping everybody out here.
Bruh.
And that's it. That's all the sound effects I got. Well, I got this one too. So on the way out of here, I'll see you guys later. God bless. Good night. Thanks for watching the Prof Show. See y'all later.
As an expert at being Mickey Mouse, yeah, I can say seriously, yeah, you're right, Rick. This is some Mickey Mouse bullshit. Thanks, Mickey. Hey, how's Donald? He's still on the stuff. Yeah. Bruh.
And that's Rick Snay, y'all. Good night, everybody. See you later.